The fire's dying. Your hands are shaking so bad you can barely feed it another stick. Outside your shelter, it's so cold your spit freezes before it hits the ground. Modern survival experts say you've got about 3 hours left to live in these conditions. Yet somehow, in the winter of 1832, a guy named Hugh Glass survived not just one night like this, but months of it, with no Gore-Tex, no emergency beacon. Just animal skins, basic tools, and knowledge so valuable it might as well have been magic. Tonight we're diving into forgotten winter survival skills that kept mountain men alive when everything around them was trying to kill them. Hey, if you're finding this helpful, a like or subscribe would mean a lot. And I'm always curious, where are you watching from? Had someone from Florida comment at midnight the other day. Love seeing where everyone's at. Okay, tonight it's mountain men in the 1830s Rockies. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Like, actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes snap open to darkness. Not the gentle darkness of your bedroom. This is different. This is the pitch black of a winter night in the Rocky Mountains, 1832. The temperature outside your shelter has dropped to 40 below zero. 40 below zero. The cold is a presence, something alive that wants you dead. You can feel it searching for ways to reach you, probing for weakness. You're lying on a thick bed of pine boughs piled at least a foot high between two parallel logs. Not for comfort, though it's better than nothing, but because without this barrier between you and the frozen earth, you'd be dead by morning. The ground is a heat thief that never sleeps, ready to suck the warmth from your body at every point of contact. That's the first thing they taught me, you think, remembering the old trapper who took you under his wing last summer. Never, ever sleep directly on the ground in winter. It'll pull the heat right out of you faster than you can make it. That old man had survived 15 winters out here, his face a map of wrinkles and scars earned in this merciless landscape, half his left ear missing from frostbite. You wonder if you'll last half as long. Around you, the buffalo robe forms a protective cocoon. It's heavy, maybe 40 pounds of dense hair and hide, but worth every ounce. Each strand of woolly undercoat creates a tiny pocket of air, thousands upon thousands of them trapping your body heat. Unlike your sleeping bag at home with its high-tech synthetic fill, this robe came with a face attached just a few months ago. You can still smell the animal on it, a constant reminder that survival here means something dies so you can live. You shift slightly, feeling the familiar weight of your wool cap still firmly on your head. The old-timers say an uncovered head is basically a chimney for your body heat. Might as well open a hole in your buffalo robe, they joke, though nobody's really laughing. You've seen what happens when someone gets careless. Last winter, a young trapper named Harris woke up without his cap, somehow lost it in his sleep. By morning, his ears were white with frostbite. By spring, he was missing parts of both. No one made fun of him. They all knew it could have been worse. The shelter around you is minimal, a three-sided lean-to made of pine branches and covered with a tarp of sewn elk hides. The fourth side faces the fire, which has burned down to coals in the night. It's designed not for comfort, but as a shield against the four killers of cold. Yeah, that's how the mountain men think of it. Cold isn't just cold, it's a predator that attacks in four specific ways: conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation. Fancy scientific terms the mountain men don't know, but man, do they understand the reality. Hold up, let me paint you a picture of what your day is going to be like, because in about 10 minutes you're going to have to leave the relative warmth of this buffalo robe and start the daily fight for survival all over again. And I promise you, it's nothing like camping in Yellowstone with your REI gear and a cooler full of beer. You're dreading what comes next. The first moments of the morning are always the worst, going from the marginal warmth of your buffalo robe into the biting cold. It's like jumping into an ice bath, except the ice bath is literally everywhere and everything. Morning, boys. Sun's almost thinking about showing up. The voice belongs to Mackenzie, the grizzled leader of your small trapping brigade. He's already up somehow, stoking the fire with practiced efficiency. You can hear the others groaning, no one eager to face what waits outside their robes. There are 6 of you in this winter camp, holed up in a valley protected from the worst of the wind by a ridge to the north and thick stands of pine. You chose this spot carefully back in November when the first heavy snows made trapping impossible. This wasn't just random, it was life or death strategy. Feet froze to your buffalo skin, Jenkins, Mackenzie calls out to the still motionless form a few feet away. Told you to sleep with your boots under your robe, didn't I? Jenkins' muffled curse makes the others chuckle. Humour is currency out here, sometimes the only thing that keeps a man going. In your head, you're screaming, just 5 more minutes in this warm cocoon. But you know better. Every minute wasted is daylight lost, and daylight is precious when surviving winter is your full-time job. With a deep breath, you steel yourself and throw back the buffalo robe in one decisive movement. The cold hits you like a physical blow, stealing your breath. Your body instantly tightens, muscles contracting against the assault. This moment, this exact moment, is when most modern people would give up. But you can't. There's no central heating to rescue you, no microwave to warm up some hot chocolate, just you versus 40 below. Not like your warm bed right now, where the worst thing you face is maybe a chilly bathroom floor for a few seconds before you can turn on a hot shower. Your buckskin shirt and pants feel stiff, almost frozen, despite having been under the robe with you. The leather crackles slightly as you move. These clothes aren't just a fashion choice, they're sophisticated survival technology, developed over generations of trial and bloodshed. The dense grain of the brain-tanned leather creates a barrier the wind can't penetrate, unlike modern breathable fabrics that can fail in extreme conditions. Remember, boys, Mackenzie often says, sweat is death out here. That's why you dress in layers, not just for warmth, but for moisture management. Your innermost layer is wool, nature's miracle fiber that keeps insulating even when damp. Over that, the buckskin, treated with bear grease to add water resistance. You can feel the slightly oily texture as you pull on your outer layer, a heavy wool capote made from a Hudson's Bay point blanket. These blankets are worth their weight in gold out here, literally a form of currency in the fur trade. The fire is your first priority now. Without it, nothing else matters. You reach for your fire-starting kit, what the mountain men call the Holy Trinity: flint, steel, and charcloth. Making fire quickly and reliably in any condition is the single most important survival skill in the mountains. Breakfast's going to be a good one, boys, Mackenzie announces, already working with something in a cast-iron pot. Got some of that pemmican with berries in it. Pemmican, a mixture of dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes berries, is the superfood of the mountains. A pound contains over 3,000 calories and will not spoil for years. It's dense, not particularly tasty to modern palates, but out here it's life itself. You watch as Jenkins finally emerges from his robe, cursing the cold with impressive creativity. His boots did indeed freeze overnight, left carelessly outside his sleeping area. Now he'll have to thaw them by the fire before he can put them on, a rookie mistake that could cost fingers or toes. You know, says Pearson, the oldest man in your group at nearly 45, I seen a fella try to put frozen boots on once. By the time we got to the next trading post, his feet was so infected the doctor took both below the knee. He spits into the fire. Of course, that doctor was mostly just a fella who owned a saw. The others laugh, but you all know it's not really a joke. Out here, a minor mistake cascades quickly into disaster. There are no hospitals, no rescue helicopters. The mountain men have a saying, there ain't no such thing as a small mistake in winter. You've come to understand the brutal truth of this. The sky outside is beginning to lighten, a deep blue replacing the utter blackness. It's going to be a clear day, which means even colder temperatures, but at least no snow. You have work to do today. The winter may seem like downtime for trappers, but survival itself is a full-time job. Firewood needs gathering, meat needs hunting, repairs need making. The mountain man's winter isn't a time of rest, but of different work. The streams may be frozen, making beaver trapping impossible, but life continues in its relentless rhythm. So get this, Mackenzie says, between bites of pemmican. I was up near the Three Forks 2 winters back with old Bill Williams. Temperature dropped so low that when Bill tried to talk, his words froze in midair and fell to the ground. We had to thaw them by the fire to hear what he was saying. Everyone laughs, including you. The tall tales and impossible stories are part of the culture, a way to process the genuinely unbelievable conditions you all face daily. Sometimes the truth of mountain life is so harsh that only exaggeration can capture it. As you chew on the dense pemmican, your body craving the fat that will fuel your internal furnace, you notice the quiet that surrounds your camp. Not the peaceful quiet of a snowy forest, but the absolute stillness of a world too cold for sound. Nothing moves, nothing makes noise. It's as if the cold has killed even the whisper of wind through pine needles. Gonna check the meat cache, announces Mackenzie, referring to the elevated platform where your group stores frozen game safe from predators. Thought I heard something nosing around last night. In the brutal calculus of winter survival, calories are currency, and your group has been carefully stockpiling them since the first snows. A grizzly or mountain lion raiding your cache could mean starvation before spring. You finish your pemmican and follow Mackenzie through the knee-deep snow, the cold burning your lungs with each breath. The thermometer that hangs from your pack, a prized possession in the brigade, shows 43 degrees below zero, and yet you're alive, functioning, working. The modern hiker found frozen in the wilderness had a pack full of high-tech gear, but lacked the knowledge that keeps you alive day after day in conditions that would send most people into panic. Gore-Tex, polyfill, and battery-powered warmers are no substitute for the deep, experiential understanding of cold that the mountain men developed. It's strange to think that while we've gained much with our technological advances, we've lost the intimate knowledge of survival that was once common. The mountain man didn't just visit the wilderness, he was of it, understanding its rhythms and dangers with the same intuitive grasp that city dwellers have of subway schedules and coffee shop locations. Cash looks good, Mackenzie reports, though his weathered face shows concern. But them tracks there. Wolf, big one, probably not alone. You nod, understanding the implications. Wolves normally avoid humans, but in the deepest part of winter, when game grows scarce, they get bold. Another threat to monitor, another element in the complex web of survival. Jenkins Pearson, you're on wood duty today, Mackenzie orders. Rest of you, we need to check the traps in the South Valley. Traps in winter? Yeah, even with streams frozen, mountain men would set traps for marten, fox and other fur bearers that remain active. The work never stops because stopping means dying. As you prepare for the day's journey, strapping on snowshoes made of bent ash wood and rawhide webbing, you think about the transformation you've undergone. 8 months ago, you were a greenhorn from St. Louis, drawn by newspaper ads promising adventure and fortune in the mountains. Now, you can read the forest like a book, judging snow depth by the bend of branches and predicting weather changes by the smell of the air. This knowledge wasn't taught in any classroom. It was earned through frost-nipped fingers, through nights when you were sure you wouldn't see morning, through watching men stronger than you succumb to the environment's merciless judgment. The mountain man's education is written in the scars on his hands and the memories of friends lost to the cold. As your small party moves out of camp, following a game trail through the thick forest, you notice how differently each of you moves. The new men, like you, still waste energy, still sweat when they shouldn't. Mackenzie, 15 years in the mountains, moves with an economy that seems almost supernatural. Each step placed precisely, each movement calculated to preserve heat and energy. Hey, you see that? Mackenzie suddenly drops to a crouch, pointing ahead. About 50 yards away, partially obscured by pines, stands a bull elk, massive and majestic. Fresh meat, a prize beyond value in the deep winter. Winds in our favour, whispers Mackenzie. Harris, circle wide to flush him this way if he runs. The rest of you, spread out. The group moves with practiced precision, a hunting formation developed over countless winters. This is the mountain man's superpower. Not individual heroism, but collective knowledge, each man playing his role in the dance of survival. Your flintlock rifle is ready, the powder hopefully dry despite the cold. A single shot is all you'll get. Miss, and it's back to pemmican. Hit, and the whole camp eats well for days. The elk hasn't spotted you yet. You can see its breath clouding in the frigid air as it pours through snow, searching for anything edible beneath. Its ribs show slightly. Winter is hard on all creatures here. Wait, the wind shifts slightly. The elk's head snaps up, nostrils flaring. "Now!" shouts Mackenzie, and 5 rifles fire almost as one. The elk stumbles, blood bright against the snow. It tries to run, but collapses after just a few strides. Clean shots, a quick death. In the ethical code of the mountains, this is as it should be. No wasted suffering, no wasted meat. As you approach the fallen animal, you feel the familiar mix of sadness and profound gratitude. This death means your life continues. The mountain men and understand this exchange better than most. They are not separate from nature, but part of its cycle of life and death. Good shooting, boys. Mackenzie nods approvingly. Now the real work starts. The real work is butchering the elk where it fell, dividing its precious meat and fat before it can freeze solid. The temperature makes this a race against time. Hands exposed too long will frostbite, but the job must be done properly. You work quickly, your knife slicing through hide and muscle with practiced efficiency. 8 months ago, this task would have been impossible for you. Now your hands know what to do, even as they grow numb with cold. Don't waste that fat, reminds Pearson, watching you work. Fat's worth more than gold out here. He's right. In the extreme cold, your body burns calories at an astonishing rate just to maintain core temperature. The mountain man's diet is built around fat, the high-octane fuel that keeps the internal furnace burning. Modern nutritionists might be horrified by the amount of animal fat consumed daily, but without it, survival would be impossible. As you work, your mind wanders to the stories you've heard of men lost in winter, of poor decisions cascading into tragedy. Last year, 2 trappers from a different brigade tried to cross a high pass too late in the season. They were found in spring, frozen in their camp, having run out of food, waiting for a storm to pass. You're thinking too much, Mackenzie interrupts your thoughts. Thinking's a luxury for summer. Winter is for doing. He's right again. The mountain man's mindset is perhaps his most important survival tool. Present-focused, practical, unburdened by abstract worries. There's only now, only the next task that keeps death at bay for another day. The elk is butchered within an hour. Its meat divided among the party for carrying back to camp. Nothing is wasted. Organs, marrow, even the brain will be used. The hide will become new moccasins or repairs for your shelter. As you shoulder your portion and begin the trek back to camp, the sun finally crests the eastern ridge, throwing long shadows across the snow. Its light is dazzling but offers little warmth. Still, you feel a surge of energy with its appearance. You've survived another night, you've secured food, you're learning, adapting, becoming something new in this harshest of classrooms. The mountain man's war against cold continues, fought daily on 4 fronts, but unlike the unfortunate modern hiker found frozen with all his expensive gear, you're winning, not through technology but through knowledge paid for in blood and passed down by those who mastered this unforgiving land. Mackenzie stops suddenly, gazing at something in the distance. Following his gaze, you see what caught his attention, a lone wolf watching your party from atop a ridge, silhouetted against the morning sky. "Reckon he smells our elk," says Harris nervously. "Reckon he does?" agrees Mackenzie, calmly. "But he'll have to wait his turn. Way of the world up here." The wolf watches a moment longer, then disappears over the ridge, a reminder that you're not the only predator fighting for survival in these mountains. The balance is precarious, the margin for error non-existent. As your party continues toward camp, you think about how different this life is from what you imagined when you signed up in St. Louis. The newspaper ads promised adventure and fortune in beaver pelts. They didn't mention the constant dance with death, the knowledge written in frostbite scars, or the transformation that would remake you from the inside out. But despite the hardships, or perhaps because of them, there's a clarity to this existence that makes sense to you now. The mountain man's life strips away everything unnecessary, leaving only what matters: warmth, food, shelter, comrades. In a world of deadly simplicity, you found a strange kind of peace. The smoke from your camp's fire becomes visible through the trees, a beacon of relative safety in the wilderness. Another day in the mountains begins, a day of work, of survival, of the knowledge that keeps men alive when nature itself seems determined to kill them. Back at camp, the day settles into its rhythm. The elk meat is being processed, some sliced thin for jerky, other portions set aside for immediate eating. Fat is rendered in the single cast iron pot the brigade shares. Nothing wasted, nothing taken for granted. Pearson approaches you, eyeing the tear in your buckskin shirt sleeve. It happened yesterday when you snagged it on a sharp branch. Seems minor, but out here, small problems grow into deadly ones. Better fix that before you head out again. He nods toward the damage. Wind will find that hole and freeze you solid from the inside out. You know he's right. The wind is the second killer, what mountain men call the thief that rides on air. Every gust that penetrates your clothing strips away the thin, warm layer your body works so hard to create. Got some sinew, you ask, already reaching for your possible bag, the buckskin pouch containing your essential survival tools. Better, Pearson grins, revealing his few remaining teeth. He pulls a scrap of brain-tanned leather from his own bag. From that mule deer last week, been saving it for someone who needs it. This small act of generosity touches you. In the mountains, giving someone repair material for their clothing might be the difference between life and death. It's not charity, it's survival through cooperation. I'll pay you back next deer, you promise, taking the precious scrap. Make sure you're alive for the next deer, Pearson chuckles, wandering back toward the fire. As you settle by your shelter to make the repair, Mackenzie joins you, his weathered face serious. Storm coming, he says without preamble. 3 days, maybe 4, big one. You glance at the clear blue sky overhead, confused. How can you tell? Pine saps running heavy on the south sides, birds flying lower than usual, that ache in my busted knee. He taps his left leg. Never wrong. In the world of the mountain man, weather prediction isn't about barometers or satellite imagery. It's about observations passed down through generations, patterns recognized through years of survival-dependent attention. We need to prepare, Mackenzie continues. More wood, more meat, if we can get it. Check all the gear. A winter storm in the Rockies isn't just bad weather, it's a siege, a prolonged attack by cold, wind and snow that can trap men in their shelters for weeks. Preparation isn't optional. You nod, understanding the gravity. Your hands continue working on the tear in your buckskin shirt, pushing the bone awl through the tough material, stitching with the sinew thread you've dampened with saliva to make it pliable. The fringe on your buckskin isn't decorative, it's functional, providing ready-made repair material when needed. How long you been wearing those same clothes, Jenkins? Mackenzie calls out to the young trapper who's sorting through his gear nearby. Jenkins looks down at his buckskins, filthy from months of constant wear. Since rendezvous. Why? Because you smell worse than a buffalo wallow in August, Mackenzie says with a straight face, causing the others to erupt in laughter. Jenkins grins. Keeps the grizzlies away. Keeps everything away, someone else chimes in. The banter continues, but underneath it lies a serious truth. The mountain man's clothing system is as sophisticated as it is filthy. It's not static, it's alive, constantly adjusted to match activity levels and changing conditions. Reminds me of that greenhorn we had 2 winters back, Pearson says, stoking the fire. Remember him? City boy from Boston, showed up at rendezvous with a trunk full of cotton shirts. Poor bastard, Mackenzie nods, a rare hint of sympathy in his voice. Never stood a chance. What happened to him, you ask, though part of you already knows. Cotton kills, Mackenzie says simply. First hunting trip, he got caught in a sleet storm. Cotton soaked through in minutes. By the time we got back to camp, he couldn't even feel his arms. Next morning, the fever took him. You nod, understanding. The trapper's saying, cotton kills, isn't hyperbole. A cotton shirt when wet becomes a cold, clammy shroud that sucks the life from you. Cotton loses all insulating properties when damp and actually conducts heat away from the body. In the mountains, fab choice isn't fashion, it's survival. That's why we use wool, Mackenzie continues, nodding toward your undershirt. Nature's miracle. Wool truly is remarkable. It can absorb up to 30% of its weight in water without feeling wet and retains 80% of its insulating properties even when soaked. For men who might get wet from snow, sweat, or fording streams, wool is life insurance. You finish repairing your buckskin shirt and hold it up to examine your work. The stitching isn't pretty, but it's strong. Buckskin itself is a marvel. The dense grain of brain-tanned leather creates a nearly impenetrable barrier against wind. You know, Jenkins says, joining the conversation, my pa was a tanner back in St. Louis, said the Indians used animal brains to tan hides because there's just enough brain in an animal to tan its own hide. That's true, nods Pearson. Mix the brains with water, work it into the hide, makes it soft as cloth but tough as iron. The tanning process is another piece of wilderness knowledge that separates life from death. The animal's brains mixed with water creates a supple yet tough material that flexes with movement while blocking wind. The leathers you'd buy in a city store wouldn't last a week out here. You slip your repaired shirt back on, then reach for your capote hanging near the fire. This heavy wool coat made from a Hudson's Bay point blanket is your final defense against the elements, your hard shell against the worst weather. The capote is a masterpiece of functional design, a long hooded coat with dense, oily wool that sheds snow and rain. The 4-point blanket it's made from would have cost nearly a month's wages back in St. Louis. Out here, its value can't be calculated in dollars, only in survival. Mackenzie watches you handle the capote with respect. Treat that better than you'd treat a wife, he advises. It'll be more faithful in keeping you warm. Got mine in trade from a flathead 4 years back, Harris adds, nodding to his own capote hanging nearby. Gave him my silver watch, 2 knives and a pound of tobacco. You overpaid, Jenkins teases. Harris shakes his head. That watch couldn't keep me warm. This can. The capote isn't just another piece of clothing. It's a portable shelter, a final line of defense against the weather. When every other layer has been penetrated, the capote can still keep you alive. We'd better get more firewood, Mackenzie announces, standing. Storm's coming. The camp shifts into action, preparing for the coming weather. You join Jenkins, heading toward the stand of deadwood you've been harvesting, each of you carrying an axe. See that? Jenkins points to a nearby pine. Its branches are bent with snow, but the trunk remains straight and strong. White pine. Burns hot, burns fast. Good for getting a fire started. And that one? You point to another tree with darker bark. Oak. Burns slow, burns steady, makes good coals for cooking and overnight. This is the language of wood, another essential piece of mountain knowledge. Different trees have different burning properties. Knowing which wood to use for which purpose is as important as knowing which plants are edible and which will kill you. As you gather fallen branches, Jenkins suddenly stops, looking at a tree about 50 yards away. Look at that standing deadwood, been dead about 2-3 years, bark starting to shed but still on. You follow his gaze. What about it? That's perfect firewood, even in a rainstorm, he explains. Been dead long enough to dry out, but the bark still sheds water, keeps the inside dry. This is the kind of knowledge that isn't written in any book. It's passed from man to man, learned through observation and experience, refined by the brutal teacher of necessity. What did you do before this? Jenkins asks as you both work. Back in civilization? Clerk in my father's store? You admit, somewhat embarrassed. It seems like a lifetime ago. Jenkins nods without judgment. I was a cobbler's apprentice, spent all day fixing fancy ladies' shoes. He laughs. Now look at me. You both glance down at your moccasins, handmade from buffalo hide. Your store-bought boots wore out within 2 months of mountain life. Like everything else from civilization, they weren't built for this world. You ever regret coming out here, you ask? Jenkins is quiet for a moment, considering. Sometimes, when it's cold enough to freeze the piss before it hits the ground. When I'm so hungry my stomach thinks my throat's been cut. He pauses. But then there's mornings when the sun hits the mountains just right, and it's like God's showing off just for you, you know? You do know. Despite the hardships, or perhaps because of them, there's a clarity to this life that you never found behind a counter in St. Louis. As you gather wood, the temperature begins to drop further, an almost imperceptible change that both of you notice simultaneously. The quality of the air shifts, becoming drier, sharper against your lungs. There's Mackenzie's storm, Jenkins mutters, glancing at the still blue sky. Feel that change? You nod. The mountain man develops senses that city dwellers never need. You can feel pressure changes, taste moisture shifts in the air, sense temperature drops before they register on any thermometer. By the time you return to camp, arms laden with firewood, the first hints of clouds are gathering on the northern horizon. Everyone works with silent urgency, preparing for what's coming. More wood is stacked, shelters are reinforced, the remaining elk meat is processed quickly. As evening approaches, you notice Mackenzie by his shelter doing something you've never seen before. He's mixing bear grease in a small tin cup, warming it by the fire until it becomes liquid. "What's that for?" you ask, curious. "Waterproofing," he replies, dipping a cloth into the grease and applying it to his buckskins in methodical circles. "Storm like this one coming, regular buckskin won't be enough. Gets wet, loses all insulating properties." "Becomes stiff as a board too," adds Pearson, who's doing the same with his own clothing. "This is another level of preparation you hadn't considered. Buckskin's fatal flaw is that when wet, it becomes heavy and useless as insulation. By treating it with bear fat or beaver grease, the mountain men create a semi-waterproof barrier that sheds light rain and snow. Here," Mackenzie offers you the small tin of grease. "Do your moccasins first, then your shirt." The grease has a strong animal smell that would be revolting in civilization. Out here, it's the scent of survival. You work it into your moccasins, watching as the leather darkens and becomes more supple. "Stuff some dry grass in those too when you sleep," Mackenzie advises. "Insulation keeps your toes from freezing." Every piece of advice is practical, tested by generations of men who faced these conditions. There are no theories here, only what works and what kills you. As darkness falls, the temperature plummets further. The fire is built higher than usual, a calculated use of resources justified by the coming storm. The brigade gathers close, eating the fresh elk meat that won't keep as long as the jerky you're preparing. "My first winter out here," Mackenzie begins, staring into the fire, "was 1815, 18 years ago now. Got caught in a blizzard up near Yellowstone. No shelter, no fire, nothing but my clothes and my wits." The camp grows quiet. Mackenzie rarely speaks of his past. 3 days that storm lasted. Dug myself a snow cave, curled up like a hibernating bear. When it finally passed, my left foot was black with frostbite. Doctor at the trading post wanted to take it off. "But he didn't," Harris says, glancing at Mackenzie's very much intact feet. Mackenzie grins. "Met an old crow woman instead. She packed my foot in moss and some kind of root paste. Hurt worse than anything I ever felt, but I kept the foot." These stories aren't just entertainment, they're education, passing down survival knowledge wrapped in narrative. "Point is," Mackenzie continues, serious again, "you respect the cold. You prepare. You never think you've got it beat. The minute you get cocky is the minute you're dead." The wind picks up slightly, sending sparks spiraling from the fire. Everyone glances northward, where clouds now cover half the sky, dark and heavy with snow. "I'm checking the horses," Harris announces, standing. "I'll come," you offer, knowing the animals will need extra care before the storm. The small remuda of horses is picketed in a sheltered hollow nearby where trees break the wind and a tiny spring provides water that hasn't yet frozen. The animals are already restless, sensing the weather change. "They know what's coming better than we do," Harris says, adjusting blankets over the horses' backs. These aren't the sleek thoroughbreds of city stables, but tough mountain ponies, smaller, shaggier, able to survive on browsing when grass is buried under snow. "Should we bring them closer to camp?" you ask. Harris considers. "Not yet. If it gets as bad as Mackenzie thinks, maybe. For now, they're better off with these trees as windbreak." Working together, you make sure each horse is secured and blanketed. Without horses, a trapping brigade is vulnerable, unable to move camps quickly, unable to carry heavy loads of furs or supplies. Keeping them alive through winter is a priority second only to human survival. By the time you return to camp, the first snowflakes are beginning to fall, huge, lazy flakes that drift down in the windless evening. "Here it comes," Pearson says quietly, watching the snow with the respect one shows a worthy adversary. Everyone makes final preparations, checking gear, adjusting shelters. Your own lean-to has been reinforced with extra branches, the sleeping area rebuilt with fresh pine boughs. Your buffalo robe waits, ready to enclose you in its protective warmth. Tonight will be the true test of all the mountain man's knowledge, his clothing system, his shelter design, his fire-building skill. The storm approaching isn't just weather, it's a predator hunting for weakness, looking for mistakes. As full darkness settles, you retreat to your shelter, wrapping yourself in the buffalo robe. Outside, the snowfall intensifies, the wind beginning to moan through the pine branches. The temperature continues to drop, but inside your layered defenses, you remain warm. This is the mountain man's victory, not conquering nature, but understanding it deeply enough to survive its most violent moods. While the storm rages, you exist in the tiny pocket of warmth you've created through knowledge paid for in blood and passed down by those who came before. Sleep comes surprisingly easily, the familiar smell of buffalo hide and wood smoke creating a cocoon of security despite the gathering storm. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, deep snow to navigate, possibly game driven down from higher elevations, the constant work of keeping the camp functioning in blizzard conditions. But for now, wrapped in your robe with the fire reflected off the shelter wall, you've achieved what the mountain man prizes above all else. Another day of survival in a land that constantly tries to kill you. Not through fancy gear or modern technology, but through the accumulated wisdom of generations who learned to read the language of cold and speak back in the dialect of survival. You wake to a world transformed. The gentle snowfall of last night has become a howling maelstrom of white. Through the open side of your shelter, all you can see is swirling snow driven by relentless wind. The temperature has plummeted further, if that's even possible. The fire needs attention immediately. Overnight, it's burned down to a bed of coals, still alive but hungry for fuel. In this weather, letting the fire die would be a catastrophic mistake. You slide out from your buffalo robe, the cold hitting you with physical force despite the layers of wool and leather. Moving quickly, you add small sticks to the coals, then larger pieces, coaxing the flames back to life with careful attention. Your breath clouds in front of your face as you work. "For morning," comes Mackenzie's voice from his shelter, or at least I think it is. It's impossible to tell time by the sun. The storm has turned day into a strange grey twilight. The entire world has narrowed to your small camp, everything beyond obscured by the curtain of falling snow. "Hell of a storm," says Jenkins, emerging from his own shelter. His beard is frosted with ice from his breath freezing during the night. "Just getting started," Mackenzie replies grimly. "This'll last 3 days minimum." The fire crackles higher now, throwing precious heat against the bitter cold. Everyone gravitates toward it instinctively, hands outstretched to the flames. "So," Pearson says, looking at you, "what would you be doing if that went out?" He nods toward the fire. "Building it again," you answer. "And if your tinder's wet, if your wood's soaked through, if the wind's blowing so hard you can't keep a spark alive, you understand this isn't idle conversation. It's a test, a teaching moment. I'd be in trouble, you admit." Pearson grins, reaching into his possible bag. "That's why we obsess over this." He pulls out a small leather pouch, carefully wrapped and tied. "The Holy Trinity." Inside the pouch are 3 items: a piece of flint with a sharp edge, a C-shaped piece of steel, and several squares of black brittle cloth. Flint, steel, char cloth, Pearson explains, holding each up in turn. A mountain man without these is a dead man waiting to happen. Mackenzie nods in agreement. First thing I check each morning. Before food, before water, make sure my fire kit is dry and ready. This isn't exaggeration. In the brutal cold of a Rocky Mountain winter, fire isn't a convenience. It's life itself. Where'd you get your striker? Jenkins asks, nodding toward the C-shaped piece of steel in Pearson's hand. Made it myself, Pearson says with pride. Used an old file from a blacksmith in Taos. Good high-carbon steel. Had to get it just right. Too soft and it won't throw sparks. Too brittle and it'll break. The striker isn't just any piece of metal. It has to be high-carbon steel, hardened and tempered to create the perfect edge. When struck by flint, tiny shavings of steel are sheared off, and these heat up from the friction of the strike until they ignite in the air, creating sparks. Show him how it's done, Mackenzie suggests, nodding toward you. Even after months in the mountains, there's always more to learn. Pearson arranges himself near the fire, sheltered from the worst of the wind. First rule, always practice when you don't need to. By the time you're freezing and desperate is the wrong time to remember how this works. He places a piece of the black char cloth on a dry log, then holds the flint in his left hand, the steel striker in his right. With a quick, practiced motion, he drags the edge of the flint down the steel, creating a shower of sparks that rain onto char cloth. Nothing happens. Gotta be patient, he says, striking again. This time, several sparks land on the cloth and one catches a tiny, glowing red ember that begins to spread. See that? Pearson says with satisfaction. That's life right there. Char cloth is the secret ingredient in the mountain man's fire-starting kit. Made by heating cotton or linen in an airtight container, the resulting carbonized material catches a spark and smolders with steady heat without bursting into flame. It's the perfect bridge between the fleeting spark and the sustained flame needed for survival. How do you make it, you ask, watching as Pearson carefully transfers the glowing ember to a prepared nest of shredded cedar bark. Take a piece of cotton or linen, old shirt works fine. Put it in a tin with a tiny hole punched in the lid. Pearson gently blows on the ember in the tinder nest, his breath carefully controlled. Put that tin in a fire. Smoke comes out the hole as it heats up. When the smoke stops, the char cloth is done. The glowing ember is spreading in the tinder nest, and with Pearson's steady breath it suddenly bursts into flame with a soft whoosh. Fire, Pearson says with simple satisfaction, carefully adding the flaming tinder to the main campfire. That's how it's done when your main fire's out and it's 40 below. The demonstration isn't just educational, it's reassurance. Knowing you can create fire in any conditions is fundamental to survival in the mountains. Without that knowledge, the first time your main fire died would likely be your last day on Earth. I've got more ways than one to start a fire, Mackenzie adds. Never trust just one method. He reaches into his own possible bag and pulls out a small magnifying lens in a protective leather case. On a sunny day, this is faster than flint and steel. Focus the sun just right and you've got fire in seconds. And when there's no sun? Jenkins asks, gesturing to the storm raging around you. Mackenzie grins, producing a small bundle of sticks and cord. Bow drill. Takes effort, but it'll work in any weather if you've got the skill and patience. The mountain man is a master of redundancy. The man with only one way to make fire is a dead man waiting to happen. Each member of the brigade carries multiple fire-starting methods, each practiced until it becomes second nature. Remember Carson? Harris asks, joining the conversation. That time on the Yellowstone? Mackenzie nods grimly. Crossed the river, lost his fire kit, couldn't get dry, couldn't get warm. By the time we found him, he was sitting under a tree, half frozen. Dead, you ask, though you can guess the answer. Dead and smiling, Harris confirms. That's the thing about freezing. Near the end, you start to feel warm, start to feel sleepy. It's a peaceful way to go, they say, but it's still going. The story hangs in the air, a reminder of the constant stakes. Out here, mistakes aren't measured in inconvenience, but in lives. Let's check the shelters, Mackenzie announces, changing the subject. Storm like this, we might be here a while. The camp disperses, each man attending to his shelter, reinforcing against the growing storm. You work on your own lean-to, adding branches to strengthen it, piling snow around the base to block the creeping wind. Mackenzie appears beside you, evaluating your work with a critical eye. Not bad, he allows, which from him is high praise. But look here, he points to the back corner of your shelter, where a small gap allows snow to sift in. Death comes through holes like that. You fix the gap, understanding his point. In survival, details matter. A small oversight can cascade into disaster. Different kinds of fire for different needs, Mackenzie says, continuing your education as you work. The one we've got now is good for a camp that's not moving, but if you're alone, on the trail, what then, you ask, genuinely curious? Starfire, he explains. Logs arranged like wheel spokes. As each burns, you push it toward the center. Lasts all night with minimal tending. You've seen this arrangement before, but never understood its efficiency. It's another piece of knowledge preserved and passed down by those who live beyond civilization's reach. For high wind, Mackenzie continues, Dakota firehole. Dig a pit, then a smaller air tunnel leading into it from the side. Fire burns in the pit, drawing air from below. Wind can howl overhead, but the flame stays protected. This is the mountain man's library of survival, not written in books, but preserved in practice and oral tradition, each technique tested and refined by generations who faced the same life or death challenges. By midday, the storm has intensified further. Wind screams through the pine branches above camp, occasionally sending clumps of snow crashing down. The temperature continues to drop, and the fire is built larger in response, a calculated use of resources justified by the extreme conditions. Might as well eat, Mackenzie decides, pulling a frozen chunk of elk meat from the cache. The meat thaws near the fire as everyone gathers around, seeking the psychological comfort as much as the physical warmth. Fire is more than just heat in the wilderness. It's a companion, a friend, a bulwark against the crushing loneliness of the winter landscape. A man alone in the mountains with only the howl of the wind and the cry of the wolf for company can find solace in the crackling flames. My first winter in the mountains, Pearson begins, his voice barely audible above the storm. I got separated from my brigade during a blizzard like this. 3 days alone, no idea which way was north. Everyone listens. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're education wrapped in narrative. All I had was my fire kit and my knife, built a snow cave, kept a small fire going at the entrance, survived on pine bark and a squirrel I managed to catch. He stares into the flames. When they finally found me, they said I was singing to myself. Don't remember that part. Man can go crazy without fire, Harris nods. Seen it happen. Cold and dark does something to your mind after a while. You understand what they mean. The fire isn't just preventing physical death, it's preserving sanity in a world reduced to howling white chaos. The elk meat is finally thawed enough to cut, and Mackenzie slices it into strips that go directly onto hot stones at the fire's edge. The fat sizzles, filling the air with a mouth-watering aroma that cuts through the sharp scent of wood smoke. So, what are you going to do with all your beaver money? Jenkins asks the group, changing the subject to something more cheerful. If we make it to rendezvous, that is. Not if, Mackenzie corrects sharply. When. That kind of thinking will kill you faster than the cold. Fine. When we get to rendezvous, Jenkins amends. What's everyone buying? New rifle, Harris says immediately. Saw a Hawken at last year's gathering that was a real beauty. I'm settling down, Pearson announces unexpectedly. Got my eye on a Shoshone woman. Her family wants 3 horses and a good rifle as bride price. This revelation brings a chorus of good-natured jeering and advice about marriage from the others. The conversation turns to women, to dreams of future comfort, to plans that extend beyond basic survival. It's a glimpse of humanity persisting even in the harshest conditions. You listen, contributing occasionally, but mostly observing the brigade dynamics. These men are more than just travelling companions. They're a survival unit, each bringing skills and knowledge that benefit the whole. The lone wolf trapper is largely a myth. Most mountain men travel in winter in small groups precisely because it increases chances of survival. After eating, with the storm still raging, there's little to do but maintain the fire and wait. Mackenzie produces a deck of cards so worn that the faces are barely visible, but everyone knows them by their unique stains and tears. A game starts, played on a flat rock near the fire. Better check the reflector, Mackenzie reminds everyone between hands. The reflector is a wall of logs built behind the main fire, designed to bounce heat into the shelters. It effectively doubles the warmth reaching you, a crucial advantage when every degree of temperature matters. You take your turn adjusting the reflector, adding a log where one has burned through. The heat reflected back is immediate and noticeable, another example of the mountain man's ingenious adaptations to extreme conditions. As the grey non-day dims toward even greyer evening, the brigade settles into the rhythm of storm survival. Pearson produces a small book from his possible bag, a treasure out here where reading material is scarce. Its cover is stained and coming apart, but he handles it with reverence. Paradise Lost, he explains, seeing your interest. Milton. Don't understand half of it, but the words have a nice sound. He begins reading aloud, the formal language strangely beautiful against the backdrop of howling wind and crackling fire. The others listen, even those who would normally scoff at such activity. In the forced confinement of the storm, any diversion is welcome. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. Pearson reads, then looks up. Sounds like the mountains to me. There's a murmur of agreement. The mountain man's relationship with this harsh environment is complex. Part adversary, part home, part spiritual testing ground. Night falls, though it's hard to distinguish from the storm-darkened day. The fire is built up further for the overnight hours, a star pattern of logs that will burn slowly through the darkness. Each shelter is checked one final time, repairs made, snow cleared from entrances. Tomorrow won't be travel weather either, Mackenzie announces. Best get comfortable. We're here until this blows over. You retreat to your shelter, wrapped again in the buffalo robe. Despite the ferocity of the storm, your combination of skills and knowledge keeps you relatively comfortable. The fire reflects off your shelter wall, creating a pool of light and warmth that defies the chaos outside. This is the mountain man's victory. Not conquering nature, but understanding it well enough to survive its worst moments. The howling wind that should be your death sentence becomes merely an inconvenience when met with the accumulated wisdom of generations. Sleep comes fitfully, interrupted by the need to occasionally check the fire or add snow to your water container as it melts. Each time you emerge from your shelter, the storm seems to have intensified, if that's possible. The world beyond your small circle of firelight has ceased to exist, replaced by a maelstrom of white. During one of these waking periods, you notice Mackenzie also awake, sitting by the fire, methodically checking his rifle despite having no plans to use it. This, you've learned, is another aspect of mountain survival. Constant maintenance, constant vigilance, using every available moment to prepare for future needs. Can't sleep? You ask, joining him by the fire. Sleep light out here, he replies. Part of me always listening, always watching, saved my life more times than I can count. You nod, understanding. The mountain man doesn't fully relax even in sleep. Some part of his consciousness remains alert to changing conditions, to dangers that might arise. Storm's actually helping us in one way, Mackenzie comments, nodding toward the swirling snow. Blackfeet won't be hunting us in this weather. The Blackfoot tribes are notorious among mountain men for their fierce resistance to encroachment on their hunting grounds. Unlike some tribes who trade with the trappers, the Blackfeet view them as invaders to be eliminated. You ever had trouble with them? You ask. Mackenzie pulls back his buckskin shirt to reveal a puckered scar on his shoulder. Arrow, 3 years back, would have finished me if it hit 2 inches lower. This is another constant reality of mountain life, the complex and often dangerous relationship with the indigenous inhabitants. Some mountain men, like Pearson, marry into tribes and adopt aspects of their lifestyle. Others, like Mackenzie, bear the scars of violent encounters. Get some sleep, Mackenzie advises, finishing with his rifle. Tomorrow's another day of this, looks like. You return to your shelter, the buffalo robe welcoming you back to its relative warmth. Outside, the storm continues its assault, searching for weakness, looking for mistakes, but wrapped in your layers of protection, with fire maintaining its vigil against the cold, you've denied death another opportunity. This is the rhythm of survival in the mountains. Constant vigilance, adaptability, and the deep knowledge that keeps men alive when everything around them is trying to kill them. Not through fancy gear or modern technology, but through understanding forged in the crucible of necessity and passed down by those who lived to tell about it. As you drift back to sleep, you reflect on how much you've learned in your months with the brigade. The mountain man's education never stops. Each day brings new lessons, new challenges, new opportunities to either thrive or perish based on your accumulated knowledge. The storm may rage for days, but inside your small pocket of heat and light created through skills that modern people have forgotten, you remain alive, perhaps the greatest victory possible in this unforgiving land. Dawn of the second day breaks with little change. The storm continuing its siege, though perhaps with slightly less fury than the night before. The fire has burned lower during the night but remains alive, a testament to the star pattern arrangement that allows for slow, steady burning with minimal attention. You emerge from your shelter, stiff from the cold, despite your buffalo robe. The snow has drifted higher around the camp, now nearly waist-deep in places. Jenkins is already up, carefully adding wood to the fire, his movements deliberate and efficient in the bitter cold. "Sleep, all right?" he asks, not looking up from his work. "Well enough," you reply, joining him at the fire. "Storm letting up?" Jenkins glances at the swirling snow. "Bit, maybe. Mackenzie will know better." As if summoned by his name, Mackenzie appears from his shelter, face tightening against the cold. He studies the sky, the wind, the way the snow falls, reading conditions that are indistinguishable to less experienced eyes. Storm center is passing, he announces. Still bad today. Tomorrow might see some clearing. This forecast isn't from barometric readings or weather maps, but from decades of observation and pattern recognition, the mountain man's meteorology. Fire needs better wood, Mackenzie observes, looking critically at the flames. That pine's burning too fast. Jenkins, help me get to the deadwood we spotted yesterday. I'll come too, you offer, eager to be useful and to learn. Mackenzie nods approval. The three of you prepare to venture beyond the immediate camp, wrapping faces against the cold, checking that axes are secure at your belts. Even a short journey in these conditions requires preparation. A casual approach to the cold leads to death. Pushing through the deep snow is exhausting work. Each step requires lifting your leg high, then plunging it down through the powdery surface. Within minutes, despite the bitter cold, you're sweating beneath your layers, a dangerous condition that Mackenzie notices immediately. Ease up, he advises. Getting sweaty is a death sentence. Pace yourself. You slow your movements, remembering the trapper's wisdom about evaporation, how moisture leaving the body steals heat 25 times faster than air alone. Better to move slowly and stay dry than rush and soak your insulating layers with sweat. After 15 minutes of careful progress, you reach the stand of trees where Jenkins spotted the standing deadwood yesterday. Mackenzie approaches one particular tree, a pine that died perhaps 3 years ago, its bark beginning to loosen but still attached to the trunk. See this? Mackenzie points to the tree. This is gold. Been dead long enough to dry out completely inside, but the bark's still protecting the wood from moisture. Even in a blizzard, the inside will be bone dry. He runs his hand along the trunk, showing you what to look for. No fungus, no rot, bark peeling but not gone, branches mostly fallen away, perfect deadwood. The three of you set to work with your axes, taking turns to conserve energy. The work is methodical, no wasted motion, no unnecessary exertion. Mackenzie calls a halt every few minutes to rest, preventing overheating and exhaustion. Different trees, different fires, Mackenzie explains during one such break. Pine's what we're cutting now. Burns hot and fast. Good for getting a fire started or for a quick cook fire. But it consumes itself too quickly for overnight. What's best for the long haul, you ask, genuinely curious about this vital knowledge. Hardwoods, oak, hickory. They burn slow and steady, make a good bed of coals that last for hours, but they're harder to ignite, so you need your pine or birch to get them started. Jenkins nods agreement. Aspen burns clean and hot. Good for cooking. Cottonwood makes a lot of smoke, but not much heat. Use it for signaling if you ever need to. This is the language of wood, a vocabulary as essential to survival as knowledge of edible plants or animal behavior. The mountain man doesn't just see trees, he sees fuel sources with specific properties and uses. Most important thing to remember, Mackenzie adds, returning to his cutting, is that wet wood and green wood will kill you faster than no wood at all. How's that, you ask, confused. Wet wood makes smoke, not heat. You'll sit there feeding your fire, thinking you're doing something useful, while you slowly freeze to death beside a smoking pile that gives no warmth. He shakes his head. Seen it happen. Man can burn through his whole wood supply trying to dry out wet logs, end up with nothing but smoke and hypothermia. The dead pine finally yields to your axes, crashing through the snow-laden branches of its neighbours. The three of you set about cutting it into manageable lengths for carrying back to camp. Cedar bark, Jenkins points out, indicating a nearby cedar tree. Best tinder there is. Grab some while we're here, stays dry under the outer layer, even in rain. You strip some of the fibrous inner bark, careful not to take too much from any one tree. Another unspoken rule of mountain life. You take only what you need, never more, aware that today's excess could be tomorrow's scarcity. With arms full of precious dry wood, you make the return journey to camp. The effort of carrying the logs through deep snow is considerable, but the reward will be worth it. A hot, sustainable fire that could make the difference between comfort and misery, or even life and death. Back at camp, Pearson and Harris have been busy maintaining the shelters, clearing snow from entrances, reinforcing walls that show signs of weakening. The camp functions as a unit, each man contributing to collective survival. Found the good stuff, I see, Pearson approves, eyeing the deadwood you've brought back. Look at this, Mackenzie says, splitting one of the logs with his axe to reveal the perfectly dry interior. Dry as summer in the middle. The difference is immediately apparent when added to the fire. The deadwood catches quickly, burning with minimal smoke, giving off substantial heat. Within minutes, the fire's character has changed from struggling to thrive. That'll hold through the day, Mackenzie says, with satisfaction. Need to think about our fire structure, though. Winds shifting. Might want to build a reflector on the north side now. This is the mountain man's constant calculation, adapting to changing conditions, anticipating needs before they become critical. A reflector fire isn't just a random arrangement, but a carefully engineered structure designed to maximize heat where it's most needed. Jenkins, get those flat rocks Mackenzie directs. We'll set them behind the fire to absorb heat during the day, radiate it back at night. Rocks as heat batteries, another piece of survival knowledge that makes the difference between comfort and suffering. The mountain man understands not just fire itself, but how to extend and direct its benefits. As you work together building the reflector, a wall of logs stacked behind the fire, Pearson approaches with a small leather pouch. Almost forgot, he says, sprinkling a pinch of something from the pouch onto the fire. The flames momentarily turn blue-green, and a pleasant resinous scent fills the air. Pine pitch, he explains, seeing your curiosity, helps the fire catch better, and it smells good. Little comforts matter out here. That's something you've come to understand during your months in the mountains. When life is reduced to its essentials, small pleasures take on outsized importance. A pinch of pine pitch for its scent, a particularly comfortable arrangement of pine boughs for sleeping, the luxury of dry moccasins after a day in snow. By midday, the fire is a masterpiece of engineering, a core of hot-burning pine surrounded by slower-burning hardwoods, backed by a reflector wall of logs and heat-storing rocks. It's a system refined over generations of trial and error, of learning what works and what kills. "Hand me that birch bark," Mackenzie says, pointing to a roll of papery white bark Jenkins brought back from your wood-gathering expedition. You pass it over, curious. Mackenzie carefully places it near the fire's edge, within reach but not close enough to ignite. Birch bark will burn even when wet, he explains. Full of oils, always keep some as emergency tinder. When everything else is soaked, this might save your life. The bark curls slightly in the heat, releasing a faint sweet smell. Even this small detail, knowing which bark burns when wet, could be the thread by which life hangs on some future desperate day. As the storm continues its assault, the brigade settles into the rhythm of forced inactivity. Cards appear again, stories are shared, repairs are made to clothing and equipment. This is the other side of mountain man life, not just the high adventure of trapping and exploring. but the long periods of waiting, of simply enduring. "Anyone need moccasin repairs?" Pearson offers, producing an awl and sinew thread. "Got time to spare." Several take him up on the offer, including you. Your moccasins show wear from months of hard use, and in this environment, foot protection isn't optional. It's life itself. "Used to be a cobbler, right?" you ask as Pearson expertly stitches a split seam on your footwear. 6 years in Boston, he confirms. Came out west for the adventure, stayed for the freedom, never looked back. "Miss civilization?" Jenkins asks, watching the repair work with interest. Pearson considers this. Miss some things. Fresh bread, music, women who don't smell like smoke and bear grease. He grins. "But I'd sooner die out here than live soft in some city, following another man's orders, breathing another man's smoke." This sentiment, the fierce independence that drives men to choose this harsh life, is common among the mountain brotherhood. They're here not just for beaver pelts, but for something less tangible, a freedom impossible in the structured confines of society. The day wears on, the storm showing signs of gradual weakening. By late afternoon, the wind has diminished enough that it's possible to move around camp without fighting a constant battle against driving snow. "Think I'll check my trap line," Harris announces. "Might be something there." "In this?" you ask, surprised. Even with the storm abating, conditions seem brutal for unnecessary movement. "Marten don't care about weather," Harris shrugs. "And their fur's worth more than beaver these days?" This is news to you. Thought beaver was king. Was, Mackenzie confirms. Markets changing, silk hats coming into fashion back east. Beavers still good money, but smart trappers are diversifying. Harris pulls on an extra layer and heads out, snow immediately swallowing his figure beyond the first few yards. The storm may be weakening, but it remains a formidable barrier to normal activity. "He'll be fine," Mackenzie assures, seeing your concern. Harris knows what he's doing. Wouldn't have survived 5 winters out here otherwise. With Harris gone, the conversation turns to changing markets, to the economics that drive the fur trade. Even here, in one of the most remote places on Earth, the fashions of Paris and London exert their influence, shaping what men hunt and what risks they take. "Heard the Hudson's Bay companies pushing south," Jenkins comments, "offering better prices at Rendezvous, undercutting the American outfits." "Politics," Pearson spits into the fire. "Don't care who buys my furs as long as they pay fair." This is another aspect of mountain man philosophy, a pragmatism that transcends national loyalty. Out here, what matters is competence, fairness, and the ability to survive, not which flag flies over which trading post. The fire needs feeding again, and you take your turn adding logs, arranging them carefully to maintain the efficient burn pattern Mackenzie established earlier. It's no longer just a pile of burning wood to you, it's a complex system, each piece serving a specific purpose in the overall goal of sustained, efficient heat. "You're getting the hang of it," Mackenzie approves, watching your work. "See how you put the green wood at the edge to dry out before burning? That's thinking ahead. That's how you stay alive out here." His praise means more than it should, perhaps because you know how rarely it's given. The mountain man isn't free with compliments. They're earned through demonstrated skill and good judgment. As evening approaches, the storm continues its gradual retreat. Stars occasionally appear through breaks in the clouds, quickly obscured again, but promising eventual clearing. Harris returns from his trapline carrying 2 marten, sleek, weasel-like creatures with valuable dark fur. "Good eating, too," he announces, already beginning the process of skinning them. Nothing is wasted in mountain life. The fur will become trade goods. The meat will feed the brigade. Dinner is a communal affair, marten meat supplemented with the last of the elk from yesterday, all of it cooked over the carefully maintained fire. Conversation flows more easily with the promise of the storm's end, with the prospect of movement and normal activities resuming. "So, what brought you out here anyway?" Harris asks you directly, something that hasn't happened often in your months with the brigade. Young fella from St. Louis, educated by the sound of your speech, could have had an easier life. All eyes turn to you, curious. It's a fair question. What drives a man to choose this existence over the relative comfort and safety of civilization? Started as a way to make money, you admit. Read those newspaper ads about adventure and fortune in beaver pelts, but now you pause, trying to articulate something you haven't fully understood yourself until this moment. Now I think I'm here because this feels more real somehow. More honest. Mackenzie nods slowly, understanding. Out here, there's no hiding from truth. Cold doesn't care who your father was or how much money you have, only cares if you've got the knowledge to defeat it. And the will, adds Pearson. Seen men with all the knowledge in the world just give up when it got hard. Mind matters as much as skill. This rings true to your experience. The mountain man's mindset, his stubborn refusal to surrender to conditions that should, by all rights, kill him, is perhaps his most important survival tool. As night falls properly, the fire is built up for the overnight hours, the reflector wall adjusted to direct maximum heat toward the shelters. Everyone makes their final preparations for sleep, checking gear, securing anything that might be affected by changing wind or additional snow. You settle into your shelter, the buffalo robe welcoming you back to its familiar warmth. Beyond the shelter's opening, the fire burns steadily, a beacon of life and security in the winter wilderness. Its light plays across the snow, creating a small circle of illumination beyond which the world dissolves into darkness. This is the mountain man's victory, carving out a space of relative comfort and safety in an environment actively trying to kill him, not through conquest of nature, but through deep understanding, through knowledge hard-won and jealously preserved. As sleep approaches, you find yourself unexpectedly grateful for this strange, harsh life. For the skills you've learned, for the self-reliance you've developed, for the clarity that comes from facing elemental challenges directly. The storm continues its retreat overhead, stars appearing more frequently through breaks in the clouds. Tomorrow will likely bring clear skies, renewed activity, a return to the business of trapping and survival. But for now, wrapped in buffalo hide with the fire's warmth, reaching into your shelter, you've achieved what the mountain man values above all else. Another day of life in a land where nothing is guaranteed. Your last thoughts before sleep takes you are not of the civilization you left behind, but of the wood you'll gather tomorrow, of which trees you'll select based on your new understanding of their properties, of how you'll continue building the knowledge that keeps men alive in the harshest environment on the continent. Morning arrives with a startling brilliance. The storm has passed during the night, leaving behind a world transformed. Everything coated in pristine white, the sky a deep cloudless blue that seems almost artificially perfect. The temperature has plummeted further with the clearing, the cold now a crystalline presence that steals your breath the moment you emerge from your shelter. Mackenzie is already up, as usual, crouched by the fire and working at something with his knife. The fire burns hot and clean in the still morning air, smoke rising in a straight column toward the blue emptiness above. Morning, he acknowledges without looking up. Storms past. Going to be a clear day. And cold. You add, your breath forming a dense cloud around your face. Coldest days always come after storms clear, Mackenzie agrees. body needs more fuel on days like this. You notice now what he's working on, slicing a frozen chunk of marrow bone from the elk, preparing it for the morning meal. The brigade's focus on food isn't mere hunger, but practical necessity. In this extreme cold, the human body burns calories at an astonishing rate just to maintain core temperature. Need to stoke the internal furnace, Mackenzie explains, setting the marrow to cook near the fire. That's your most important weapon against the cold. What's inside you? The others emerge from their shelters, drawn by the promise of food and the need to begin the day's activities. With the storm past, normal routines can resume, checking trap lines, hunting, gathering more firewood. What's for breakfast? Jenkins asks hopefully, eyeing Mackenzie's preparations. Marrow and the last of that elk liver, Mackenzie answers. Need the fat today. This focus on fat isn't random, it's survival strategy. Fat is the high-octane energy source of the fur trade, the concentrated fuel that keeps a man's internal furnace burning in conditions that would otherwise kill him. Remember that greenhorn from last year? Pearson says, joining the group by the fire. The one who wouldn't eat the fat, kept trimming it off his meat? The others nod, some laughing at the memory. Collapsed 3 days into our first hunt, Pearson continues. Plenty of lean meat in his belly, but his body was starving for fat. Had to drag him back to camp on a travois. Rabbit starvation, Mackenzie nods soberly. Seen it happen more than once. What's that, you ask? Not familiar with the term despite your months in the mountains. Man can starve to death eating nothing but lean meat, Mackenzie explains. Rabbit meat is so lean that your body spends more energy trying to digest it than it gets from the protein. Without fat, you can't properly use that protein. Your body keeps burning itself up from the inside. Mountain men call it mal de caribou, or rabbit sickness, Harris adds. Your guts empty out, you get weaker and weaker, and eventually your heart just stops, even with a belly full of food. This knowledge that protein alone is insufficient, that fat is essential for survival, runs counter to modern nutritional beliefs but is fundamental to life in the mountains. The human body requires that concentrated energy, that pure fuel to maintain heat in conditions that constantly try to steal it away. The marrow begins to sizzle as it heats, releasing a rich, savoury smell that makes your stomach growl. Marrow is almost pure fat, a delicacy in the mountains not just for its taste, but for its life-sustaining properties. Going to check my trap line today, Harris announces, accepting a portion of the cooked marrow from Mackenzie. Should be good hunting too, after a storm. Animals will be moving, looking for food. Take Jenkins with you, Mackenzie decides. Rest of us will reinforce the main camp, get more wood in. Storm might be over, but winter's far from done with us. This is the constant reality of mountain life. Even moments of relative ease are just preparation for the next challenge. There is no true respite, only varying degrees of struggle. Breakfast is consumed quickly, everyone eager to begin the day's work while the weather allows it. The marrow and liver, foods that might seem unappetizing in civilization, are devoured with genuine appreciation here, where their value is understood on the most fundamental level. Always eat the fatty parts first, Pearson advises you, noticing you've saved some of the marrow for last like a treat. Never know when you might be interrupted. Best fuel goes in first. You nod, understanding his point. In the mountains, priorities shift. Taste becomes secondary to function. Food isn't cuisine, it's survival. After eating, the brigade separates to their assigned tasks. You join Mackenzie and Pearson in fortifying the camp, gathering more firewood, and checking the food cache to assess supplies. Getting low, Mackenzie observes, surveying the cache. Need a good hunt soon, or a good trap run. Harris and Jenkins might bring something back today, Pearson offers. Can't count on might, Mackenzie replies. Need to plan for certain. The mountain man doesn't rely on hope or luck. He calculates, prepares, anticipates needs before they become critical. It's this forward thinking, this constant assessment of resources versus requirements that keeps him alive when others perish. As you work collecting more firewood from the surrounding forest, Mackenzie points out a fat pine stump, its surface rich with amber resin. Fat wood, he explains, breaking off a piece to show you. Full of pitch, burns hot and fast, even when wet. Good emergency fire starter. You take the piece, noting its weight and sticky texture. It's heavier than normal pine, almost like it's been soaked in something. What makes it different from regular pine, you ask? When a pine dies standing, the resins in the sap sink down into the stump and roots, Mackenzie explains. Concentrates there over years. Some old stumps are so full of it they're practically solid fuel. This is another entry in the mountain man's encyclopedia of survival. Knowing not just which wood burns, but which parts of which trees burn, in which conditions. Nothing is random. Everything is observed, catalogued, and passed down through generations of hard-won experience. By midday, the camp is fortified with fresh supplies of wood, the shelters reinforced against future storms, the central fire burning steadily. The sun rides high in the clear sky, but its light offers little warmth against the bitter cold that followed the storm. 30 below, at least, Pearson estimates, his breath forming ice crystals in his beard. Maybe 40. At such temperatures, exposed skin freezes in minutes. Every movement outside requires careful preparation, multiple layers, nothing left to chance. The cold is a constant presence, a predator waiting for any lapse in vigilance. Harris and Jenkins return from their trap run around mid-afternoon. Jenkins carrying a brace of snowshoe hares and Harris with a small red fox, its winter coat thick and lush. Traps were empty, Harris reports, but we found these. Fox wandered right into my path, bold as you please. Hungry, probably, Mackenzie nods. Storms hard on everything out here. The animals are prepared immediately, their hides carefully removed for future use. Their meat butchered with practiced efficiency. Nothing is wasted. Organs, marrow, even the blood is collected and put to use. Oh, fox liver's especially good, Pearson tells you as the meal is prepared. Full of fat and something else, don't know what, but it warms you from the inside better than anything. That something else is probably vitamin A, you suggest, remembering something from your education back in St. Louis. Pearson looks at you blankly. Don't know about vitamins, just know it works. This is the difference between academic knowledge and survival knowledge. One theoretical, the other practical. The mountain man might not understand the science of nutrition, but he knows precisely which foods keep him alive in conditions that should kill him. The fox and hares are cooked directly over the fire, their fat dripping onto hot stones and sizzling. The smell is intoxicating after days of preserved food, and the brigade gathers close, anticipating the fresh meal. Nothing like hot food on a cold day, Jenkins sighs appreciatively, accepting his portion. Eat the fat, Mackenzie reminds everyone, though no one needs the instruction. Going to get colder tonight. The meat is consumed with the efficiency of men who view food as fuel first, pleasure second. Still, there's evident enjoyment in the fresh meat, in the variety it offers after days of preserved elk. Best save some fox fat, Mackenzie decides as the meal concludes. Render it down for pemmican. Pemmican, that concentrated superfood of the mountains, requires fat as its binding agent and primary energy source. Made from dried meat pounded into powder, then mixed with rendered fat, and sometimes dried berries. It contains everything needed for survival in a form that won't spoil for years. A pound of good pemmican has over 3,000 calories, Pearson tells you as he begins the rendering process. Melting fox fat in a small tin container near the fire can keep a man going for 2 days of hard travel if needed, or 1 day in weather like this, Jenkins adds wryly, gesturing to the bitter cold around them. The reliance on fat shapes not just the mountain man's diet, but his entire approach to hunting and trapping. He doesn't just hunt for meat, he hunts for fat, with a specific focus on animals and seasons that provide the most concentrated energy source. Bears best right before hibernation, Mackenzie explains, as the fox fat renders slowly, filling the air with a rich, slightly wild smell. Walking treasure of calories, 6 inches of fat all over its body sometimes. Buffalo cow in fall after a summer of grazing, adds Harris. Back fat can be 6 inches deep, prize of the plains, that is. As the fat renders, transforming from solid to liquid, you marvel at how your perception has changed during your months in the mountains. In St. Louis, such a process would have seemed repulsive. The focus on animal fat unhealthy or primitive. Here, you understand it as essential, as the difference between life and death. You know what I miss most about Rendezvous, Jenkins says suddenly, watching the fat render. Beaver tail, the others murmur agreement, some closing their eyes as if remembering the taste. What's special about beaver tail, you ask, never having tried this apparently legendary food? It's basically a solid mass of fat, Harris explains reverently. 2-3 pounds of pure fat on a big one. Roast it over the fire till the skin blisters and peels away, and what's inside, man, there's nothing like it. Rich, oily, Pearson adds, clearly savouring the memory. Most calorie-dense food you'll ever eat. After a winter of lean times, first beaver tail of spring is better than any fancy meal in St. Louis. The rendered fox fat is carefully poured into a small hide container to cool and solidify. It will be used for cooking, for waterproofing leather, for medical purposes, and for making pemmican. In the economy of mountain survival, fat is a multi-purpose treasure. As afternoon transitions toward evening, the temperature drops further, the blue sky deepening toward twilight. The fire is built up in anticipation of the bitter night ahead, the reflector wall adjusted to direct maximum heat toward the shelters. Going to be a 3-dog night, Pearson observes, looking at the crystalline clarity of the sky. 3-dog night, you ask, unfamiliar with the term. So cold you need 3 dogs in your blankets to stay warm, he explains with a grin. Old saying from somewhere. This casual reference to extreme cold, cold that would terrify most civilized people, is typical of the mountain man's attitude. What would be an emergency elsewhere is simply a condition to be managed here, a challenge to be met with knowledge and preparation. As darkness falls completely, the stars emerge with breathtaking clarity. The Milky Way, a bright swath across the black dome above. The cold intensifies with nightfall, the snow creaking underfoot with a sound like breaking glass. Your breath freezes instantly, ice crystals forming in your beard and eyebrows within minutes of exposure. The brigade gathers around the fire for the evening meal. More fox and hare meat, supplemented with the last of the pemmican made weeks earlier. Conversation is minimal, everyone focused on the food, on the essential task of fueling their internal furnaces for the night ahead. Eat till you're full, Mackenzie advises. Then eat a little more. Body burns it all in weather like this. You've noticed your own increasing appetite during your months in the mountains, the need for far more calories than you ever consumed in civilization. What would have been gluttony in St. Louis is simple necessity here, where the body burns energy at a ferocious rate just to maintain core temperature. How many calories do you think we need out here? You ask, curious about the actual numbers. Mackenzie considers. 5,000-6,000 a day in this cold. More if you're working hard. This number, double or triple what a man might consume in a city, explains the mountain man's constant focus on food, on fat, on maximizing caloric intake whenever possible. It's not hunger in the conventional sense, but a profound biological need, the body's desperate attempt to generate enough heat to survive. After eating, final preparations are made for the night. Shelters are checked one last time, the fire built up in its star pattern for steady burning through the darkness, water containers placed near enough to prevent freezing but not so close as to risk melting. You retreat to your shelter, wrapping yourself in the buffalo robe that has become your nightly sanctuary. Despite the extreme cold outside, your cocoon of animal hide and trapped air keeps you remarkably comfortable, another testament to the mountain man's deep understanding of how to survive conditions that should, by all rights, be fatal. As you settle in, Mackenzie appears at your shelter entrance, holding something wrapped in a scrap of hide. Almost forgot, he says, handing the small package to you. Saved you some of the fox liver. Eat it before sleep. Helps the body generate heat through the night. This small act of consideration, setting aside a particularly valuable part of the meal for a less experienced member of the brigade, touches you unexpectedly. It's not sentimentality, but pragmatism. The mountain man takes care of his own because survival depends on it. Thanks, you reply, accepting the package. Mackenzie nods once, then withdraws to his own shelter without further comment. Words are used sparingly out here. Like every other resource, you eat the liver as instructed, noting its rich, almost sweet flavor and unusual texture. Whether from actual nutritional properties or the power of suggestion, you do feel a warmth spreading through your core afterward, as if your internal furnace has been stoked with particularly effective fuel. Sleep comes easily, despite the bitter cold beyond your shelter. The combination of physical exertion, calorie-rich food, and the hypnotic effect of the nearby fire creates a profound tiredness that pulls you under quickly. Your last conscious thought is a realization of how completely your perspective has shifted during your time in the mountains. Fat, once something to be trimmed away and discarded, has become precious, essential, the difference between life and death. The mountain man's wisdom, earned through generations of trial and error, has replaced the book learning of your former life with something more fundamental, more reliable. In your warm cocoon of buffalo hide, with fox liver fueling your internal furnace, you've achieved what the mountain man values above all else. Another day of survival in a land where nothing is guaranteed, where every sunrise is a victory against conditions designed to kill. You wake to Mackenzie gently shaking your shoulder, the buffalo robe frost-rimed around its edges where your breath escaped during the night. Sun's almost up, he says simply, breaking camp today. The decision to move isn't a surprise. You've been in this location for nearly a week, first by choice and then forced by the storm. Game is getting scarce in the immediate area, and the brigade needs to find new trapping grounds as the weather allows. Outside your shelter, the world remains transformed by cold. The thermometer hanging from Mackenzie's pack shows 38 below zero, so cold that spit freezes before it hits the ground, so cold that the snow squeaks like crushed glass underfoot. Yet despite these conditions, the brigade functions with practiced efficiency, preparing for a day of travel through deep snow. Eat hearty, Mackenzie advises as breakfast is prepared, the last of the fox meat and some pemmican from the newly made batch. Long day ahead. No one complains about the cold, about the difficulty of the coming journey, about the discomfort of breaking camp in such extreme conditions. The mountain man doesn't waste energy on pointless complaint. He accepts conditions as they are, then deals with them using the knowledge and skills that keep him alive. Thinking we head southwest, Mackenzie announces as the brigade eats. Valley opens up that way, might find elk coming down from higher ground after the storm. No one questions his judgment. Mackenzie's 15 years in the mountains have earned him the right to make such decisions. His experience, a resource as valuable as any piece of equipment. After eating, the camp is dismantled with practiced efficiency. Shelters are taken down, usable materials packed, the site returned to something close to its natural state. The mountain man doesn't leave obvious traces of his presence, not from modern environmental concerns, but from practical necessity. A camp that can be easily found is a camp that can be raided by hostile tribes or claim-jumping trappers. Leave no sign, Pearson reminds Jenkins, who's carelessly kicked some burned logs from the fire ring. Blackfeet have eyes like hawks. Jenkins immediately corrects his mistake, carefully returning the logs to the fire ring, then covering the entire area with fresh snow. In the mountains, such carelessness could be fatal, not just for him, but for the entire brigade. Snowshoes are essential for travel in the deep powder left by the storm. Each man carries a pair, handmade from bent ash wood with rawhide webbing attached to moccasins with leather thongs. Without them, each step would mean plunging thigh-deep into snow, exhausting and potentially deadly when energy conservation is crucial to survival. The horses are brought in from their sheltered hollow, each one carefully checked before being loaded with the brigade's gear. These aren't the sleek thoroughbreds of civilized stables, but tough mountain ponies, smaller, shaggier, adapted to survive on minimal forage in harsh conditions. Storm was hard on them, Harris observes, running his hand along one pony's ribs. Getting thin. They'll manage, Mackenzie replies, though his tone suggests concern. Without horses, the brigade would be severely limited, unable to carry traps, supplies, and furs in quantities that make their enterprise viable. By mid-morning, the camp is packed and loaded. All traces of human presence erased except for the compressed snow that will soon be covered by fresh fall. Mackenzie studies the terrain, the sky, the subtle signs that inform his route choice. Southwest it is, he confirms. Jenkins, you break trail. Breaking trail is exhausting work, requiring the lead man to push through untouched snow, creating a packed path for those who follow. It's a responsibility that rotates among the brigade. No one expected to bear it for too long. The brigade moves out in single file, each man following in the footsteps of the one before, the horses bringing up the rear led by Harris. Progress is slow, deliberate, every movement calculated to conserve energy while covering ground. You find yourself in the middle of the line, watching Jenkins ahead as he pushes through the deep snow, his movements becoming more laboured with each passing minute. Breaking trail is grueling work, especially in powder this deep. After 30 minutes, Mackenzie calls a halt. My turn, he tells Jenkins, who gratefully falls back in the line, breathing hard from the exertion. This is the mountain man's approach to challenging tasks, sharing the burden, rotating responsibilities, ensuring no one reaches exhaustion. It's not kindness, but pragmatism. A man pushed beyond his limits becomes a liability to the entire group. As the brigade moves through the pristine winter landscape, you're struck by the profound silence. No bird calls, no insect sounds, no rustling of leaves, just the squeak of snow under snowshoes and the occasional snort from one of the ponies. It's a silence so complete it seems to have physical presence, a void that swallows all sound. Beautiful, isn't it? Pearson says quietly, noticing your attention to the surroundings. Worth all the hardship just to see this. He's right. Despite the brutal cold, despite the physical challenges, there's an undeniable majesty to this landscape. Snow-laden pines stretching to the horizon, distant mountain peaks catching the morning sun, the play of light and shadow across untouched snowfields. It's a beauty few civilized eyes will ever witness, a reward reserved for those willing to risk everything to be here. Mackenzie calls another halt after an hour, this time to check bearings and assess conditions. No one speaks unnecessarily. Conversation requires energy, and energy is precious in the cold. Words are used sparingly, like every other resource. Creek should be about 2 miles ahead, Mackenzie says, consulting his mental map of the territory. Good beaver habitat in spring. Might find elk nearby now. There are no physical maps, no compasses, no GPS units. The mountain man navigates by intimate knowledge of terrain, by landmarks, by the sun's position, by the subtle characteristics of drainages and ridgelines. It's a knowledge impossible to reduce to paper, dependent on years of observation and experience. The journey continues, Harris now breaking trail while Mackenzie falls back to check on the horses. The cold remained intense, but physical exertion generates enough heat to maintain comfort as long as layers are managed properly. Too warm, too wet, too dead, Pearson recites when he notices you opening your capote slightly to vent excess heat. The trapper's warning. You nod, understanding. Overheating leads to sweating, which leads to wet clothing, which leads to dangerous heat loss when activity slows. Better to be slightly cool while moving than to risk damping insulating layers with sweat. By early afternoon, the brigade reaches the creek Mackenzie mentioned, now just a snow-covered depression in the landscape, its water frozen beneath thick ice. The surrounding area shows promising signs, tracks of elk and deer in the snow, stands of aspen partly browsed by ungulates. This'll do, Mackenzie decides, surveying the location. Good water source when it thaws, shelter from north wind, game in the area. The process of establishing a new camp begins immediately, roles assigned without discussion, each man knowing his responsibilities from long practice. Harris cares for the horses, finding them a sheltered area with access to browse. Jenkins clears snow for the main camp. Pearson begins gathering firewood. You and Mackenzie scout the immediate surroundings, looking for game signs and potential hazards. Always know what's around you, Mackenzie advises as you move through the trees near the creek bed, where game trails run, where predators might den, where wood's available, where the best shelter is. This constant assessment, this reading of the landscape as if it were a text written in snow, bark and broken twigs, is fundamental to mountain survival. Nothing is random. Everything is observed, analysed, incorporated into the ongoing calculus of staying alive. Wolf tracks, you note, pointing to clear prints in the snow near the creek bank. Big ones. Mackenzie examines the tracks, his expression thoughtful. Pack moved through yesterday, heading east, probably following those elk we saw signs of. Problem, you ask, knowing wolves can be both competitors for game and potential threats. Just something to be aware of, he replies. Wolves generally avoid men unless they're starving, but in deep winter, everything's hungry. This is the mountain man's relationship with the wilderness, not fearful but respectfully cautious, aware of potential dangers without being paralyzed by them. He doesn't view nature as something to be conquered, but as a complex system to be understood and navigated. By the time you return to the main campsite, significant progress has been made. Jenkins has cleared a large area down to bare earth. Pearson has accumulated an impressive pile of firewood, and Harris has established a corral of sorts for the horses using rope and natural barriers. "Looks good," Mackenzie approves. "Let's get a fire going before we lose the light." The fire-making ritual begins again. The careful preparation of tinder, the striking of flint against steel, the patient nurturing of tiny flame into sustainable heat. Despite having witnessed this process countless times now, you still find something mesmerizing in the birth of fire from nothing but skill and simple tools. As the flames establish themselves, shelter construction begins. Unlike the previous camp, where you stayed long enough to build more substantial lean-tos, this will be simpler accommodation, what mountain men call half shelters, designed for shorter stays while trapping an area. 3, maybe 4 days here, Mackenzie estimates as he helps you set up your shelter. Then we move again, following game and finding new beaver habitat for spring. This is the rhythm of mountain life. Periods of movement interspersed with brief stays, always following resources, always adapting to conditions. There is no permanent settlement, no fixed abode, only the continuous flow of survival in harmony with the environment's offerings. By evening, the new camp is functional, if not comfortable. Shelters are established, fire is burning steadily, a small cache of food is protected from predators, and the horses are settled in their makeshift corral. The sun sets early in the winter mountains, the brief daylight hours precious for necessary work. Dinner is pemmican supplemented with pine bark tea, not for flavour, but for the vitamin C that prevents scurvy, another piece of knowledge passed down through generations of mountain experience. Modern nutritional science might explain why it works, but the mountain men knew it worked long before understanding the biochemistry. "Saw some beaver sign by the creek," Harris reports as the brigade gathers around the fire. "Old cuttings, good spot when the ice goes out." "That's why we're here," Mackenzie nods with satisfaction. "Should be prime trapping come spring thaw. Till then, we live off the land and wait." This patience, this willingness to endure the harsh winter months in preparation for spring trapping is characteristic of the mountain man's mindset. He thinks in seasons, in cycles, understanding that success requires alignment with natural rhythms rather than resistance to them. "Tell that story about the Crow winter camp," Jenkins suggests to Pearson, settling back with his tin cup of pine bark tea, the one with the grizzly. Pearson grins, his weathered face creasing into well-worn smile lines in the firelight. "Which time? Seems like every winter I spent with the Crow had a grizzly story. The one where it came right into the lodge," Jenkins clarifies. Pearson nods, remembering. "Winter of 26, I think it was. I was living with a band of mountain crow, married to the chief's niece at the time." He pauses, looking momentarily wistful. "Good woman, made the best moccasins I ever wore. The others wait patiently." The mountain man's storytelling has its own rhythm, not to be rushed. Anyway, we were camped up near the Bighorn River. Deep snow that year, game getting scarce. Middle of the night, I'm sound asleep in our lodge when I hear this snuffling outside. Thought it was someone's dog at first, but it was too loud, too heavy. Pearson takes a sip of tea, drawing out the moment. Next thing I know, the lodge cover starts moving, and this massive paw rips through the buffalo hide like it was paper. My wife's screaming, I'm fumbling for my rifle, and before I can find it in the dark, there's a grizzly head pushing through the hole, outlined against the stars. The brigade listens intently, even those who've heard the story before. In the isolation of the wilderness, such tales are precious entertainment as well as valuable lessons. What did you do, you ask, genuinely curious. Only thing I could do, Pearson shrugs, grabbed a burning stick from the fire and jabbed it right in the bear's face. Bear let out a roar you could hear clear to Mexico, then backed out quick as it came in. Lucky, comments Harris. Damn lucky, Pearson agrees, but that's not the end of it. Bear circled the camp all night, trying to get into other lodges. Come morning, the Crow chief organised a hunting party, tracked that bear 5 miles through deep snow before bringing it down, took 6 men and 12 shots. And, Jenkins prompts, knowing there's more. And that bear was starving, Pearson finishes soberly. Nothing but skin and bones under all that fur. That's what hunger does in winter. Makes everything, even the biggest predators, desperate. The story hangs in the air, a reminder of the precarious balance of winter survival, not just for men, but for all creatures. In the mountain man's worldview, there's no judgment of the bear, no sense that it was wrong or evil for trying to find food. There's only recognition of shared struggle against common adversary, the cold. Like I always say, Mackenzie observes, stoking the fire, out here everything's trying to stay alive, same as us. Can't blame a creature for doing what it needs to. This perspective, this lack of anthropomorphic projection onto nature, is fundamental to the mountain man's mindset. He doesn't see the wilderness as malevolent or benevolent, merely as indifferent, operating according to its own logic and rhythms. His survival depends not on conquering this system, but on understanding it deeply enough to work within its parameters. My father was a merchant, you find yourself saying, the firelight and shared stories creating an unusual openness. Thought nature was something to be tamed, to be owned. Used to say civilization was man's victory over wilderness. The others listen, curious about this glimpse into your past life. What do you think now? Pearson asks after a moment. You consider the question seriously. I think he was wrong. This isn't something you can defeat. You can only learn to live with it on its terms. Mackenzie nods approval. That's the difference between men who survive out here and men who don't. Some come thinking they'll conquer the mountains. Mountains always win those fights. This humility, this recognition of human limitations against the vastness of natural forces, isn't weakness, but wisdom. The mountain man's strength comes not from domination, but from adaptation, from the hard-earned knowledge that allows him to exist in harmony with conditions that should, by all rights, kill him. As night deepens, the conversation dwindles, each man drawn into his own thoughts by the hypnotic dance of flames. The fire is built up for the night, the star pattern that allows for slow, steady burning without constant attention. Watches are assigned, 4 hours each rotating through the night, a necessary precaution against both predators and the treacherous cold that can steal life from the unwary. You take first watch, sitting wrapped in your buffalo robe near the fire, rifle across your knees. The others retreat to their shelters, the sounds of their movement gradually replaced by the deep breathing of sleep. Alone in the firelight, surrounded by the vastness of the winter mountains, you reflect on the journey that brought you here, not just the physical miles from St. Louis, but the mental distance travelled. The young store clerk who set out seeking adventure and fortune in beaver pelts has been replaced by someone different, someone shaped by hard experience and the wisdom of men like Mackenzie and Pearson. Will the ship's orchestra play, do you think? You ask. They're quite good. I believe so, Mr. Bishop confirms, though I heard one of the musicians complaining that their sheet music for the latest ragtime pieces hasn't arrived. Apparently it was supposed to be aboard, but got misplaced in Southampton. Perhaps they could play some of Scott Joplin's older pieces, Maggie suggests. I wouldn't mind hearing The Entertainer again. As if on cue, the cafe's small trio begins playing a recognisable ragtime melody. Several heads turn in appreciation, and a few couples in the corner begin to sway slightly in their seats. If they're playing dance music, we should be dancing, Guggenheim declares, rising suddenly. Madame Aubar, would you do me the honour? He leads his companion to a small open space near the musicians where they begin to dance despite the limited room. Their movements are elegant and practiced, suggesting long familiarity with each other's rhythms. Other couples follow suit, creating an impromptu dance floor in the cafe. Harry Widener leads his wife to join them, while Mr. Bishop looks momentarily torn before offering his hand to Maggie, who accepts with an amused smile. You don't mind? He asks you, suddenly concerned about leaving you alone at the table. Not at all, you assure him. I'm happy to watch. Left temporarily alone, you sip your champagne and observe the scene with contentment. There's something magical about this unexpected moment of spontaneous joy. Elegant couples dancing in a faux Parisian cafe in the middle of the Atlantic, the ship's gentle movement adding a subtle counterpoint to their steps. The dancing continues for several songs, eventually drawing in nearly everyone from Guggenheim's party. You're about to accept an invitation from a gentleman at a neighbouring table when Giglio, who has also remained seated, leans toward you. May I point something out without seeming impertinent? He asks quietly. Intrigued, you nod. The gentleman who just invited you to dance, I recognised him from a previous crossing on the Mauretania. He's known to target wealthy women travelling alone, particularly those wearing expensive jewellery. You glance discreetly at the man, now hovering nearby with barely concealed impatience. His attire is impeccable, his manner refined, but something in his eyes, a calculating quality you hadn't noticed before, suddenly seems apparent. I see, you murmur. Thank you for the warning. My apologies if I've overstepped, Giglio says, withdrawing slightly. Not at all. I appreciate your concern. When the gentleman approaches again, you decline his invitation with a polite excuse about a developing headache. His smile remains fixed, but his eyes flash with momentary annoyance before he moves on to another prospective partner. The dancing gradually winds down as the hour grows later. Couples return to their tables, slightly flushed and laughing. Maggie drops into her chair beside you, fanning herself with a menu. Mr. Bishop is surprisingly light on his feet for such a serious man, she confides. Who knew bankers could dance? The gathering begins to disperse as it approaches midnight. The day has been long and full, and even the most energetic passengers are showing signs of fatigue. Guggenheim, however, seems determined to continue the festivities. The night is young, he protests, as the Wideners make their excuses. Surely we could move to the smoking room for a nightcap. Some of us plan to attend the church service tomorrow morning, Eleanor Widener replies firmly, which requires being awake before noon. One by one, guests depart until only your original party remains. You, Maggie, and the Bishops. Even Guggenheim finally concedes to the late hour, escorting Madame Aubar toward their respective staterooms, with Giglio following discreetly behind. Shall we retire as well? Mrs. Bishop suggests, stifling a yawn behind her gloved hand. I think I might take a brief turn around the deck first, you decide, suddenly reluctant to end the evening, just to clear my head before bed. I'll join you, Maggie offers. The air will do us good after all that champagne. You bid goodnight to the bishops, promising to meet for breakfast, and make your way out to the promenade deck. The night air is bracingly cold after the warmth of the cafe, a shock that clears away the slight champagne fog in your head. The deck is nearly deserted at this hour. A few hardy souls stand at the rails, smoking late-night cigarettes or simply gazing at the extraordinary canopy of stars visible far from the pollution of cities. The only sound is the rush of water against the hull and the distant, ever-present hum of the engines. You and Maggie find a relatively sheltered spot near a lifeboat where the wind is less biting. Looking up, you're struck speechless by the celestial display. Thousands of stars scattered across the velvet blackness, the Milky Way a brilliant smear of light overhead. "It makes you feel small, doesn't it?" Maggie says softly. "All these people aboard with their wealth and titles and petty concerns, and then there's this." She gestures upward. Puts things in perspective. "I was just thinking the same thing," you admit. "We're so insulated in there, with the electric lights and orchestras and 10-course dinners. Out here, you remember we're just a tiny ship in an enormous ocean, under an even more enormous sky," Maggie adds. You stand in companionable silence for several minutes, each lost in private contemplation. The ship's steady progress creates a perpetual breeze carrying the clean scent of open ocean. Despite the chill, there's something profoundly peaceful about this moment, a rare stillness in the midst of the voyage's constant social whirl. "I think I'll stay out a bit longer," Maggie eventually says. "Don't feel obliged to wait with me. Are you sure? It's getting quite cold." She smiles. "I'm tougher than I look. Besides, we don't get stars like this in Denver. Too much smoke from the smelters. I want to savor it while I can." You squeeze her hand in understanding before taking your leave. The walk back to your stateroom is a solitary journey through the ship's quieting spaces. Most passengers have retired, leaving the corridors and public rooms eerily empty compared to their daytime bustle. The grand staircase, normally teeming with ascending and descending figures, stands in majestic silence. Your footsteps echo slightly on the marble floor as you descend toward B-deck, the ornate clock on the landing showing nearly 1 in the morning. In your stateroom, Emily has long since gone to bed, leaving a small lamp burning and your nightclothes laid out. The cabin is pleasantly warm thanks to the electric heater, creating a cocoon of comfort against the Atlantic night. The process of undressing without assistance is challenging, evening gowns of the era not being designed for independent removal, but you manage through long practice of travelling without a lady's maid. Hooks are unfastened, pins removed from your hair, jewels carefully stored away. Freed from the constraints of corset and formal attire, you perform your nighttime ablutions at the marble-topped washstand. The face in the mirror looks different from the one that greeted the morning, slightly flushed from champagne and fresh air, eyes bright with the day's experiences, hair tumbling loose around your shoulders. You slip between the crisp linen sheets with a sigh of pure contentment. The subtle vibration of the engines creates a soothing background hum, while the gentle rocking of the ship provides a cradle-like motion that's deeply relaxing. As you drift towards sleep, images from the day float through your mind. The electric camel in the gymnasium, the Turkish bath's exotic tiles, Guggenheim dancing with Madame Obar, stars scattered across the Atlantic night, all part of this extraordinary floating world that carries you steadily westward toward New York. Tomorrow will bring Sunday services in the morning, perhaps more deck games if weather permits, another progression of elaborate meals, and the promised dance in the evening. Each day aboard Titanic offers new experiences, new acquaintances, new pleasures. But for now, there is only the comfortable embrace of your bed, the rhythmic pulse of the ship's engines, and the knowledge that while you sleep, Titanic continues her stately progress across the vast, dark Atlantic. Your last conscious thought before sleep claims you how fortunate you are to be experiencing the maiden voyage of this magnificent vessel, surely the most luxurious and modern ship ever to sail the seas. You dream of endless corridors and rooms that shift and change as you move through them, the surreal geography of shipboard life translating into dreamscape. In your dream, you're searching for something important, moving from the Turkish bath to the gymnasium to the grand staircase, always just missing whatever it is you seek. A gentle knock at your door pulls you from sleep. For a moment, you're disoriented, the subtle movement beneath you unfamiliar until memory returns. You're aboard the Titanic in your stateroom on B deck. "Good morning, madam," Emily says quietly, entering with your morning tea. "I've brought extra hot water today, it's quite cold out." You sit up, accepting the steaming cup gratefully. Outside your porthole, the sky is the deep blue of early morning, not yet touched by sunrise. The ship seems particularly quiet. Even the ever-present engine vibration feels muted somehow. "What time is it?" you ask, sipping the perfectly brewed tea. "Just after 5, madam. You asked to be wakened early if you recall." You had indeed made the request, though in your sleep-fogged state you'd momentarily forgotten. Last evening, as you drifted off to sleep, an idea had formed to experience a sunrise at sea, something you'd heard was spectacular but had never witnessed on previous Atlantic crossings. "Thank you, Emily. The blue walking suit today, I think, and my heaviest coat." "Very good, madam. I've already laid them out, and I've included your wool scarf and gloves. The steward says it's below freezing on deck." You dress quickly, eager to be outside before the first light breaks. The ship is eerily silent as you make your way through the corridors and up the grand staircase. At this hour, even the most diligent stewards are scarce, and fellow passengers are still wrapped in dreams behind closed doors. Pushing open the heavy door to the boat deck, you're met with a blast of cold that takes your breath away. The air is knife-sharp with cold, carrying the pure scent of open ocean. You pull your scarf tighter around your neck and button your coat to the chin before stepping fully outside. The deck is completely deserted, save for a solitary officer on watch, pacing slowly near the bridge. He nods politely as you emerge, but doesn't approach, respectful of your evident desire for solitude. You find a spot at the port rail facing east where the faintest lightening of the sky suggests the coming dawn. The horizon is still indistinguishable, sea and sky merging in a uniform darkness. Above, a few stubborn stars remain visible, though most have already faded into the brightening sky. The cold is intense but clarifying, chasing away the last cobwebs of sleep. Your breath forms small clouds that are immediately whipped away by the wind. Beneath your gloved hands, the rail is ice cold even through the wool. Time passes in peaceful solitude as you watch the eastern sky slowly transform. First comes a barely perceptible lightening along the horizon, then a faint band of palest gold. The transition is so gradual that it's impossible to pinpoint when night truly becomes dawn. But eventually, the dark water begins to differentiate itself from the sky, the horizon appearing as a sharp line between the two. As light grows stronger, the sea reveals itself in all its morning glory, not the sparkling blue of afternoon, but a deep, steely grey with occasional flashes of silver where waves catch the strengthening light. The vastness of it strikes you anew, this endless expanse of water stretching to every horizon crossed by your single vessel. The sun itself, when it finally appears, emerges with surprising swiftness once its upper edge breaches the horizon. A sliver of blazing gold becomes a semicircle, then a full disk that seems to leap free of the sea, too brilliant to look at directly. Its light catches the higher clouds, painting them in shades of pink and amber that reflect delicately on the water below. Magnificent, isn't it? Says a quiet voice beside you. You turn, startled from your reverie, to find Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, standing nearby, hands clasped behind his back as he gazes at the sunrise. "I didn't hear you approach," you admit. "Yes, it's breathtaking. I try to catch at least one sunrise during every crossing," he says. "It reminds me how small we really are, despite all our grand engineering. That sun has risen over empty ocean at this exact spot for millennia. We're just passing through." There's something poetic in his observation, seems at odds with his reputation as a practical shipbuilder. You study his profile, noting the mixture of pride and humility in his expression as he looks out over the ship, his creation silhouetted against the dawn sky. "Do you ever get used to it?" you ask. "The knowledge that you designed something so immense?" He considers the question thoughtfully. "No, I don't believe I do. Every time I step aboard, there's a moment of disbelief. All those drawings and calculations, all those meetings and arguments over details, and here she is carrying over 2,000 souls across the Atlantic." He gestures toward the ship stretching before and behind you. "There are over 3 million rivets holding her together. Did you know that? 3 million. And I worry about every one of them." "Surely you don't need to worry. Everything seems perfect." "That's kind of you to say." His smile is gentle. "But no ship is perfect. This one's closer than most, but I keep a notebook of things I want to improve for her sister ship, the Britannic. Already have 15 pages of notes." "Such as?" "Small things, mostly. The private promenade decks on B deck have proven very popular. I'd include more of those. Some of the first-class cabins are too small. The Turkish bath cooling room has no natural light. I'd change that. And of course, more lifeboats." "More?" you ask, glancing at the row of boats secured along the deck. "There seem to be quite a few already." "Not enough," he says quietly. "Not nearly enough, but I was overruled on that point. Said they'd make the boat deck look cluttered." A shadow crosses his face. Form over function, the eternal battle in design. He seems about to say more when a steward approaches, looking apologetic for interrupting. "Pardon me, Mr. Andrews. You're wanted in the engine room. Chief engineer says there's something you should see with the starboard propeller shaft." Andrews sighs, then nods. "Duty calls. Enjoy the rest of the sunrise, madam, and the voyage." He departs with the steward, leaving you alone once more with the strengthening dawn. The sky is fully light now, though the sun remains low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the deck. The sea has transformed from grey to a deep, translucent blue that seems to hold the morning light within its depths. More of the crew have appeared, going about their morning duties, checking equipment, coiling ropes, polishing brass fixtures already gleaming from yesterday's attention. They work with quiet efficiency, their movements practiced and sure despite the ship's gentle rolling. The cold has seeped deeply into your bones despite your heavy coat and gloves. With a last look at the open ocean, somehow more impressive in the clarity of morning light than in the romantic glow of sunset, you turn back toward the interior of the ship. The contrast between the sharp cold of the deck and the warm, still air inside is momentarily dizzying. You pause in the doorway, allowing your body to adjust to the sudden change. The grand staircase is still quiet, though you can hear distant sounds of activity as the ship begins to wake. Steward's footsteps, the clatter of dishes being prepared for breakfast, the muffled voices of crew members going about their duties. Rather than returning immediately to your stateroom, you decide to explore the ship in this rare moment of morning solitude. Without the usual crowd of passengers, Titanic reveals herself differently, more intimate, more appreciable as the marvel of engineering that she is. You wander the promenade deck, your footsteps echoing slightly in the enclosed space. Through the large windows, the rising sun casts golden light across the polished floor, creating patterns that shift and change with the ship's movement. Here and there, a steward polishes brass or arranges chairs, nodding respectfully as you pass. The first-class lounge, usually buzzing with conversation, stands empty and expectant like a theatre before the audience arrives. Sunlight streams through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and bringing out the rich details of the wood panelling. You take a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship, the intricate carvings, the perfect proportions, the seamless joining of materials. Without the distraction of social obligations, you can see how truly extraordinary this floating palace is. In the reading and writing room, a single elderly gentleman sits by the window, already absorbed in a book despite the early hour. He glances up briefly as you enter, offers a polite nod, and returns to his reading. You browse the bookshelves, running your fingers along the leather-bound spines. Novels, poetry collections, reference works, all provided for passengers' enjoyment. Gradually, the ship comes more fully to life around you. More passengers appear, early risers heading for breakfast or morning constitutionals. The subtle shift from night stillness to day's activity happens so incrementally that it's impossible to pinpoint when one becomes the other, much like the dawn itself. By 7:30, when you return to your stateroom to properly prepare for the day, Titanic has fully awakened. The corridors bustle with stewards delivering morning tea and breakfast trays, passengers emerging for early walks, the ship's daily rhythm reasserting itself after the quiet of night. Emily has prepared your morning bath, another luxury of shipboard life, hot water appearing as if by magic whenever desired. As you soak in the steaming tub, you reflect on the previous day and night, the sunrise just witnessed and the day to come. Sunday aboard Titanic promises its own distinct character. Church services will be held in the dining saloon, transformed temporarily into a chapel with the captain himself often reading the lesson. The day's activities tend toward the gentler and more sedate. Reading, writing letters, quiet conversation. Meals remain elaborate, but the entertainments are more subdued out of nominal respect for the Sabbath. After your bath, dressed in a morning outfit suitable for church services, you make your way to the dining saloon for breakfast. The room is about half full, many passengers choosing to take breakfast in their cabins on Sunday mornings. You join Maggie at a table near the windows, where she's already working through a hearty plate of eggs and smoked haddock. "You're up early," she observes. "I knocked on your door around 6, but Emily said you were already out and about." "I watched the sunrise from the boat deck," you explain, accepting coffee from a hovering steward. "It was magnificent." "Worth freezing for?" "Absolutely. I ran into Mr. Andrews, the ship's designer. He had some interesting things to say about improvements he'd make to the next liner." "Such as?" "More lifeboats, for one thing." You glance out the window at the sunlit ocean, deceptively calm and peaceful in the morning light. He seemed concerned there weren't enough. Maggie follows your gaze, her expression thoughtful. Let's hope we never need to find out. The conversation turns to plans for the day. Church service at 10:30, perhaps a brisk walk on deck afterward if weather permits, then luncheon. Maggie mentions a book she's borrowed from the ship's library that she thinks you'd enjoy. The normal rhythm of shipboard life reasserts itself, the extraordinary moment of solitude at sunrise already fading into memory. Yet something of that peaceful interlude remains with you, a sense of perspective gained by watching dawn break over the vast Atlantic, a reminder of the thin line between the constructed world of human luxury and the implacable natural world surrounding it. As the day progresses with its gentle Sunday rhythm, this sense of dual awareness stays with you, appreciating the remarkable achievement that is Titanic, while simultaneously conscious of her ultimate insignificance against the backdrop of ocean and sky. It's a paradox perfectly embodied in Andrew's expression as he looked out over his creation in the dawn light. Pride mingled with humility, confidence tempered by caution. The church service, held in the dining saloon temporarily transformed with portable altar and hymn books, captures this same curious duality. The captain reads from the Book of Common Prayer, his strong voice carrying easily through the large space. O eternal Lord God, who alone spreadest out the heavens and rulest the raging of the sea, who hast compassed the waters with bounds until day and night come to an end. The ancient words, speaking of God's dominion over the waters, take on particular resonance when heard in the middle of the Atlantic aboard a ship that represents humanity's most advanced attempt to master those same waters. You glance around at your fellow passengers, heads bowed, voices joined in hymns, the social distinctions temporarily muted by shared ritual. In this moment, Titanic is not merely a luxury liner, but a community, a temporary society formed of disparate individuals brought together by circumstance and choice. For these few days between Southampton and New York, you exist in this self-contained world, with its own customs and rhythms, its hierarchies and connections, its shared experiences of sunrise and sunset, meals and music, conversations and silences. The day continues its gentle progression, luncheon in the dining saloon, an hour with a borrowed novel in the quiet of your stateroom, tea in the palm court where the orchestra plays subdued classical selections appropriate to Sunday. All throughout there's a tranquility to the ship that seems distinctive to this day of the week, a collective exhale after the more frenetic socializing of previous days. Evening brings another elaborate dinner, though slightly less formal than the previous night's affair. Afterward, instead of separating into the traditional ladies' lounge and gentlemen's smoking room, many passengers gather in the reception room where the orchestra has indeed set up for dancing as rumoured. The space is not designed as a ballroom, but the furniture has been rearranged to create an adequate dance floor. The orchestra plays a mix of waltzes and the more contemporary two-steps, careful to keep the selections appropriate to Sunday evening sensibilities. Couples move around the floor in measured circles, their formal attire adding elegance to the scene. You dance with several partners. Mr. Bishop, a gentleman from the captain's table whose name you can't quite recall, even Thomas Andrews, who proves surprisingly graceful despite his engineer's practicality. Between dances, you converse with new acquaintances and established friends. The temporary intimacy of shipboard life making it difficult to distinguish between the two. The evening winds down earlier than the previous night, whether due to Sunday propriety or simple fatigue from the accumulation of days at sea. By 11, the reception room has largely emptied, passengers drifting away to their staterooms or for final nightcaps in the smoking room. You find yourself once again drawn to the boat deck, though this time you're not alone. Maggie accompanies you, both of you wrapped in warm coats against the night chill. "I wanted to see the stars once more," she explains as you find a sheltered spot near the officers' quarters. "Tomorrow night might be cloudy, and the night after will be too close to New York, too much light pollution." You look up at the vast canopy of stars, impossibly bright and numerous away from land. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like spilled silver, while familiar constellations appear somehow different, clearer, more defined in the pure air. "Do you ever think about how small we are?" you ask, echoing Andrew's earlier sentiment. All of this luxury, all of our concerns and conversations, and then there's this. You gesture toward the star-filled sky and dark ocean surrounding you. "All the time," Maggie replies, quietly. "That's why I try not to take anything too seriously. We're just specks when you really think about it. Might as well enjoy the ride." You stand together in companionable silence, the only sounds the rush of wind, the distant thrum of engines, and the soft splash of waves against the hull far below. Despite the cold, there's something profoundly peaceful about this moment, suspended between sky and sea, between the old world left behind and the new world ahead, between the social person you present by day and the quieter self that emerges in such moments of solitude. "I should turn in," Maggie eventually says, stifling a yawn. "Church service this morning, dancing tonight. I'm not as young as I pretend to be." You smile at her self-deprecation. "I think I'll stay just a bit longer." Left alone, you take a final few minutes to absorb the night, the cold air filling your lungs, the starlight reflecting off the dark water, the solid deck beneath your feet contradicting the knowledge that you're moving steadily across an abyss of ocean. When the cold finally becomes unbearable, you reluctantly turn back toward the ship's interior. The transition from the stark reality of night at sea to the warmth and luxury of Titanic's first-class spaces is always jarring, like moving between different worlds, different realities. In your stateroom, Emily has turned down your bed and left a small pot of hot chocolate keeping warm on the electric heater. The thoughtful gesture brings a smile to your face, one of countless small comforts that define the first-class experience aboard Titanic. After preparing for bed, you slip between the sheets, their crisp coolness quickly warming to body temperature. The chocolate, rich and sweet, creates a spreading warmth from within that complements the external comfort of your surroundings. As drowsiness begins to claim you, your mind drifts through the day's images. Sunrise over the Atlantic, the captain reading prayers, couples waltzing in the reception room, stars scattered across the night sky. The gentle motion of the ship beneath you becomes part of your drifting consciousness, rocking you towards sleep like a child's cradle. In these last moments before dreams take over, you experience a profound contentment, not just with the luxury surrounding you, but with the extraordinary privilege of this journey itself, to cross between worlds in such comfort, to witness ocean and sky in their countless moods, to exist temporarily in this floating society with its curious mixture of formality and intimacy. Whatever awaits in New York, whatever futures unfold beyond this voyage, this moment aboard Titanic remains perfect in its transience, a brief, shining interlude suspended between continents, between elements, between states of being. Your thoughts grow increasingly diffuse as sleep approaches, the boundaries between consciousness and dreams blurring like the horizon at dusk. The last sensation you register is the subtle vibration of the engines, carrying you steadily westward through the night. And as you drift into dreams, cushioned in warmth and comfort, while Titanic steams onward across the vast Atlantic, there's no way you could know that in just a few short nights, this world of luxury and certainty will encounter its own dawn reckoning with the implacable forces of nature, the same forces that painted this morning's sunrise and scattered tonight's stars across the endless sky. For now, there is only peaceful sleep, gentle motion, and the promise of another day aboard the most magnificent vessel ever built. The greatest ocean liner in history carries you through the night, her lights blazing against the darkness, her course set confidently toward a future no one aboard can possibly foresee. Sleep now, wrapped in the warm cocoon of your bed, as the rhythmic motion of the ship gently rocks you deeper into dreams. Let the soft hum of distant engines become the soundtrack to your rest. Tomorrow is another day aboard Titanic, full of new experiences and pleasures, but for now there is only this perfect moment of peace suspended between worlds on the dark, starlit Atlantic.